Nice to see Isaac sitting there.
Yep. Welcome, Isaac, a new member to the board. Thanks for pointing that out, Rick, and welcome to our first part of our meeting, the special meeting that we're having on the virtual board meeting. Thank you for everyone to attend. This special meeting's really to allow us to conduct this virtual board meeting that we'll have as soon as this is passed. What I am going to do is hand it off to Michael, if you don't mind, Michael, to raise a motion. There are two motions to get to this discussion. The first one authorizes us with some adjustments in bylaw 3, and the second one formally allows the virtual meeting to happen. So without ado, Michael, if you want to raise the motion.
Yeah, so actually it's just based on the discussions with the city clerk, just one motion. And the motion would be that based on the discussions of the board in respect to holding electronic meetings, that the Oshawa Central Business District Improvement Area Board of Management pass bylaw 3, which is attached to the agenda, being a bylaw to amend procedure bylaw 2 to permit electronic participation in open and closed meetings in cases where an emergency has been declared to exist in all or part of the city of Oshawa, and that such participation by a member count towards quorum.
So Michael's raised the motion. Do I have a seconder?
Yep.
Thank you. And now we can have discussion. Any questions regarding that that particular motion, folks?
Just as a point of clarity as well, the motion will allow for the committees of the board to meet as well electronically as the Board of Management at large.
That's important because we still have business to attend to. So again, the fact that we can now reconvene all the committees virtually is a good news story. So we can start that in an official capacity. Any questions on the aspect of conducting a virtual meeting in terms of we're doing a virtual special meeting to actually allow a virtual meeting, which is it's kind of ironic, but anyways, it works. This is the process. So. Okay, not hearing any discussion. Can I get a vote on the motion that's on the table? All in favor, please type in the chat. Or no, sorry, it's actually a roll call. Am I correct, Amanda?
You are, yes.
Okay, Michael, assuming that you've raised the motion, I'm assuming you're a yes?
Yes.
Isaac?
I'm a yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Sue?
Sue doesn't vote.
I'm so sorry about that, Sue.
Don't vote, Ivana. I'm just we're the policy advisors.
I just wanted to hear your voice, Sue. Thank you.
Oh.
Peter?
Yes.
And Rick, you seconded. I'm assuming you're a yes?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So we've got unanimous.
Did we hear from Cindy? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, she did.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I assume she did. Cindy, do you want to confirm?
Yep, that's confirmed.
Okay, thank you. And we see Cindy. Very good. Excellent. I guess we have to close. We have to adjourn the special meeting if everyone doesn't mind. Somebody raising it.
I move to adjourn the special meeting.
Thank you, Rick. Anybody want to second it?
I'll second. Yep.
Andrea, thank you. All in favor? I think we're.
Aye.
I'm not going around the horn one more time. So.
How about, can I suggest in a case like this where you think the vote's going to be unanimous, you just say anyone opposed? And then if nobody says I'm opposed, then it's passed.
I'm going to defer to our governance and our rules lady, which is Amanda. I think I don't have a passion for the details, and I'm definitely not in favor of rules. So, Amanda, is it more the dissenting side? Is it easier to do it that way? Does that make it official?
The city clerk has approved the virtual guidelines that have been given to you, and that requires a roll call. However, any deviation would be up to the Board of Management, and I don't want to be seen like I'm passing the buck, but I'll pass it off to Michael.
Yeah, as opposed to you, Ivano, being a background in the law, I am a stickler for the rules. So I would prefer that we just do another quick roll call if that's okay with everybody.
I'm good with that.
I think with a small group like this, it's not an issue. But I run my faculty council with we've got 60 people, so I just say if anyone opposes, yes. But in the case of 6 or 7 people, we should be okay.
Fair enough. I'm happy to do that. So I'll start again around the horn on my screen. Michael,
Yes.
Isaac,
Yes.
Glenn,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Jeanette,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Rick.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so we're good to go. We're out of camera or stop recording or no? Welcome everyone. Call the meeting to order. Thank you for attending our first virtual board meeting of the BIA on May 28th, 2020. I'm calling the meeting to order and opening the general meeting. Can I get an acceptance? Can I get a motion to accept the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion for a change to the agenda.
Okay, what's the change?
We've got an additional matter to speak to for in camera. So the agenda only shows regarding a personal matter about an identifiable individual. Well, there's also another matter that needs to be spoken to in camera regarding contractual negotiations with the board. It has to be in camera because the negotiations, if made public, could prejudice the bargaining position.
Okay, we're going to add that to 12. We'll call that 12 E. Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, we'll add that. Any other adjustments to the agenda? Not hearing any. Can I get a motion for the adjusted agenda?
So moved.
That's Rick. A seconder?
I'll second it, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Any other discussion about the agenda? We have 3 visitors speaking today, and Amanda will bring them in. Just alerting everyone that we have quite a big agenda today, and we've got 3 speakers, and they'll come in shortly. But can I get a vote on the adjusted agenda? Michael?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Peter? I
Yes.
imagine. Great. And Rick?
Yes.
And I say yes. So thank you for that. Item number 4, declaration of conflicts. Any declarations on this current agenda? I have one, and when it comes up, maybe Glenn, if it's not a voting matter, but just for rules sake, on that item, if you can take over for the meeting for that one item, I'd appreciate it. The agenda, the conflict for me is in 11A1 on committee reports. Winter Festival of Lights, our company, not that I've had a hand in it, I've got a conflict internal to my company as well. Oshawa Power put in a proposal, so I wasn't involved in the proposal, but I'm not going to be involved in that discussion either.
Yeah, okay.
Hearing no other conflicts, we get to the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the board from February 27th?
I'll move.
Thanks, Michael. Can I get a seconder?
I'll second it, Cindy.
Thanks, Cindy. Any discussion, any adjustments, changes, omissions? Everyone's good. Hearing none. Doing the roll call to accept the minutes. Michael, since you moved, I'm assuming you're a yes.
Yes.
Cindy, since you seconded, I'm assuming you're a yes.
Yep, of course.
Isaac?
I'd like to abstain my vote since I wasn't in attendance. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Perfect.
Thank you for that. Glenn,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
Jeanette,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm a yes. Thank you very much. That concludes item number 5 on the agenda. We're now at the presentation section. And Amanda, who do we have up first?
I'm going to admit our presenters. So just give me 1 second. They're coming in. First, we have Daryl and Louise.
Do we have to do the motion to invite them in for information at the beginning or at the end of their session? Sorry.
I don't believe so.
Hello, can
And
you
they-
hear me?
Oh, yes, Louise. Thank you for joining us. We're
Great.
just I was just asking the question whether we have to motion you in or not, and I think I was told no, we're good. Is that true, Amanda?
That is true. We just need to do a motion before their departure to receive for information any delegation or presentation.
Okay. Welcome, Louise. Thank you for
Thank you.
attending our virtual meeting. I appreciate the opportunity to sort of be patient with us, as this is our first virtual meeting of the board, the BIA. Normally we meet on Simcoe Street there at Core 21.
Yeah.
So we're all learning the technology. Some of us have been using different technologies over the last little while, but certainly we welcome you to the board and look forward to your presentation. Are you going to file any materials with us? We know we have your letter. I don't know if you're going to actually do a presentation.
Yes, well, I sent you my letter earlier, my May 5th letter.
Right.
And then I sent you a list of sort of the 21 unlucky property owners where we did an exercise and calculated out what they would be paying with the change and the 2020 budget. And that's just one caveat. That was based on 2019 numbers. Yet it should have been based on 2020, but we didn't have it at the time. And the other thing is I can clean up these notes and I'll send them in if you like. My speaking notes.
It's up to you. If you want to, we'll be happy to take them in. You can always send them in later if you like, but we're happy to accept it in. But okay, I've introduced you. You have 5 minutes. Hopefully, Amanda will sort of be our timekeeper if she'll give you the heads up or whatever to sort of start wrapping up. But with that, I will hand it over to you and look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I certainly thank all of you for your volunteer service on the board. I thought I would start and tell you a little bit about myself. I've had a business for the past 28 years, and for the last 25 years, I've been located downtown, always within the BIA. During this time, I also served as a volunteer and chair of the Downtown Action Committee. And later I served on Oshawa Council between 2000 and 2010. My delegation is not about staff or the value proposition of the BIA. I've been on the board. And I understand what the BIA contributes to our community, and I value that very much. My delegation is really concerned with the new business environment brought on by COVID-19 and the fact that there currently provincially mandated legislation that's in place on large social gatherings, requiring the cancellation of events and certain promotions which make up the balance of the 2020 budget. You know, in my almost 30-year love affair with downtown Oshawa, and Glenn can attest to that, he's known me a long time, we've never faced anything like this. This is sort of like the Spanish flu and the Great Depression all rolled up in one. But there's one caveat. It's happening almost simultaneously to everyone at the same time. And that really has impacted the economy in ways we still don't know. My May 5th letter was really a plea to the board to take immediate action to reduce the BIA expenditures, considering the impact of COVID-19 on small business. You know, honestly, early on, I expected my letter would fall on receptive ears at the board. Frankly, I expected just to get a call from you, Ivano, you know, not to worry, Louise, we're on this. We're taking care of this. I thought the chair would actually bring a motion from the BIA to reduce the BIA expenditures to city council because of the impact of COVID-19. No one could have ever anticipated that we would face something like this. You know, I guess about 10 days ago, the BIA website was launched. And I was, you know, it had been a 7-month hiatus, so I was glad to see it up, and it looks beautiful and it's wonderful. But it's all about events, and those events sort of have to be canceled. And it just sort of hit me, you know, is the board missing what's going on with regards to these events? Is it delaying sort of taking action on this? And it's really my sincere hope that the BIA has the organizational agility to stop, listen, and retool for a rough ride that's ahead of us economically, because it's going to be rough. As we all know, March 23rd represented more than an economic shutdown. It really changed business as we knew it and the way we go about our business every day. Everyone started to slash expenses, me included. I guess I was home for about a week after the shutdown, and I thought I got to change the way I'm doing things. And many of us have been closed for 2 months. A significant portion of my business was lost. Initially, for the first, I guess, 4 weeks, I lost 100% of it. I'm slowly getting some back. Others are still closed. My costs have gone up because I've had to buy equipment for people to work from home and software for security. The prohibitive cost of home delivery apps for takeout has significantly reduced margins for eateries and restaurants by as much as 30 and 40%. Landlords cannot collect rent. Many depend on the rent to meet their obligations. It's their job. They own a building and they rent it out to tenants, and they that's how they feed their families. And there, you know, I was speaking with a couple of folks, and they can't make their own mortgage payments on their building or on their own properties, and they're using their credit cards to buy groceries. Large venues, private venues too, have no idea when they're going to open the bars, and most students will be online in the fall, so it's going to further impact the eateries. Everyone's hurting, large and small. We're all dealing with the uncertainty of COVID-19. We're worried about our staff and our families, and the customers are afraid. They're not coming back yet for the merchants, you know, that are street level. And personally, except for Glen, you know, I'm not aware of another business that's actually, you know, has increased sales. And, you know, everyone right now, including myself, is dedicated to, you know, slowing the cash burn and reducing every possible expenditures. And I know there's going to be midnight moves and bankruptcies and retirements. And I know that is going to dominate the landscape, not for the next, you know, 2, 3, it's going to come in waves, but likely 6 months to a year. We're nowhere near the bottom of this. And I know it's hard to hear if you're an optimist and you're a doer and you're a go-getter, but it's the cold hard truth. And I know the board really wants to help, but there's precious little the board can do but batten down its own hatches and ride out, I think, the economic tsunami that's about to come. So my request is to reduce this year's budget to the 2019 amount of 251,000, I think it was 251,750, and then restore the cap for this year, and consider developing a strategic plan for the board in light of COVID-19 and its impacts, with full engagement of the membership. And I know I've called for, you know, a virtual town hall with members, and I know the chair's very experienced because I participated in his virtual town hall for PUC, which was really well run and appreciated by the community. How's my time? Do I have a couple more seconds?
You basically went over, but it sounds like you're wrapping up. So unless you have something urgent.
Yeah, there's just one point that I'd like to make. That one of the counselors, and I appreciate it wasn't the board representative on council, suggested that the board needs the extra money this year to you know, to help small businesses, deserving businesses. And I really want to caution against pitting merchants against property owners during this time, and because, you know, if you fall into the trap, you're going to be accused of playing Robin Hood, you know, taking from the large property owners to give to the little guys. You know, we've never done that within the BIA over the past 30 years, and I don't really think it's the board's role to engage in social engineering and playing, picking winners and losers. And I just think that, if you go in that direction with ad hoc programs, et cetera, it just opens the board to a lot of scrutiny and accusations of favoritism and stuff. So I just want to caution the board with regards to that. But that statement was made by another Councillor Giverson. It was not made by Rick Kerr. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for your delegation.
Question.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, thanks for your delegation and presentation. Appreciate the feedback. And again, it represents various businesses and different views. So we appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time to do that. I'm going to open the floor to any questions. If there's any questions from any of the board members who are all virtually connected, we have unanimous attendance by the board members, in case you didn't know that, Louise.
Okay, great.
Glenn? Sorry, Glenn, are you asking a question or adjusting your camera? Okay, great. No, it's not a question. Hearing no questions, Louise, thank you very much. And please do send the notes in to Amanda, or on the website. There's the email link, and
Okay.
we'll be sure to post them. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm just going to exchange places with Daryl because we had technical difficulties this morning. So
No
we had a
worries.
failure on one of our devices. Thanks.
No worries. Amanda, I take it Daryl's next on the agenda to speak.
He is, yes. Oh,
Daryl. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Amanda.
I apologize, Daryl. Could we please do a vote to accept that that delegation for information, please?
Great. Do we need a mover and a seconder?
I do, yes, and a roll call.
Okay. Do we have a mover? Okay. Thanks, Rick.
I'll move it. Yep.
Seconder.
I'll second.
Thanks, Jeanette. Let's go around the horn. Michael?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Glenn? He said yes. Your speaker.
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Rick, you moved it, so I'm assuming you're a yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you very much. Daryl, I just seen you come on. Very good. Nice to see you again. I don't know if you caught the. Yeah, yes. I don't know if you've caught some of the dialogue I had with Louise or not. You've got 5 minutes. I mean, we're not going to really pin you down to 5 minutes. If you need an extra minute or so to wrap up, we'll give you that latitude. We want to thank you for taking the time to make the presentation and get involved. We appreciate the feedback from our membership, and without further ado, I'll give you the floor, and it goes over to you.
Ivana, can I ask you? I'm seeing some lovely faces on the screen. I don't know who some of these people are. Would it be appropriate that we could do a quick introduction, or do we have time to do that? I don't know who these people are.
We do, and that's we do, and that's fine. Why don't I
know some of them.
Yeah, I'll go around my order of the screen, and they do a quick introduction. Michael?
Okay, great. That's good.
Hi there, Michael Hunter, board member and chair of governance. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Isaac?
Morning, Daryl. I was just recently actually appointed to my position on the board, and partner and wealth advisor at Compass Wealth Partners, and I previous to that served on the marketing committee.
Congratulations. That's where I started.
Yeah, awesome.
Glenn, I'm sure you know Glenn, but I'll let Glenn I'll let Glenn do his own introductions.
No, there's no introduction needed. Just
bring your car in now. It needs to be cleaned.
A clean car is a happy car.
Right.
Andrea?
Good morning, Daryl. I'm Andrea De Silva, and I'm a board member and the events, the chair of events.
Jeanette?
Hi, Daryl. Good morning. My name is Jeanette, and I chair the beautification committee. So if you have any suggestions or any comments in the future, I'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you.
I think you know Sue. I'll let her do the quick introduction. But
morning, Sue.
Good morning, Daryl. How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to be here.
Cindy?
Morning, Daryl. My name is Cindy Malachowski. I'm a property owner downtown, and I'm the chair of the Community Development Committee.
I know your dad, or knew your dad. Great guy. Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, hi, Daryl. We know each other. I'm dean at the university downtown.
Nice to hear you. I don't see you, but I hear you. Okay.
I'm not worth looking at today, so.
Okay, fair enough.
Kyle, I'm sure you know, he's the other half of the city contingent that's represented on the board. Kyle Benham.
Hey, Daryl, nice to see you.
Good morning.
And of course, Rick Kerr, who's the appointed member of council. Rick?
Yeah, I just don't have video.
Good morning.
And of course, myself, Ivano Lavrachos, as chair and with Oshawa Power. So thank you for paying the bill. We appreciate it. And of course, if you need a little reprieve, we will allow you to kick the can down the road and give you some time to do that. So
appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. It's good to. And it looks like we have someone from the OBIA.
Oh,
well.
Sorry. Yes.
Nice to meet you too. Who's that?
Kay Matthews. Kay, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Kay Matthews. I'm the executive director of the OBIAA, or what we call the OBIA. We represent the more than 315 BIAs across the province. And on our board, we have 4 ministry liaisons. So the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, the Ministry of Economic Development, I won't go through the whole name, and the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. So, you know, we are the ones that are kind of the liaison between the government and all of our BIAs, and our goal is to help and build capacity of BIAs. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Daryl, over to you.
Thank you. Well, just to share a little bit about me for those who don't know me, I'm the 3rd generation owner of Wilson Furniture in Oshawa. I think we're probably one of the larger retail stores in the BIA, been around for 86 years. I've also been, like you folks, a director on the board as a volunteer for 15 years, 10 of them as chair. So I've sat in the hot seat like you, Ivano. For those who know me, you know I've been a passionate supporter of the BIA over the years. I've defended many budgets, and unfortunately, I am having a hard time defending this one. Those of you who know me know that. I was vocal about it last fall. We know the increase has been significant and the programs are ambitious. I understand that. In good times, this budget in 1 year was going to be difficult to handle. In tough times like we've had in 2019, this is, in my opinion, over the top. And I hope you've had a chance to watch my video. I'm not a professor like Professor Stute, but someone said that I could be, not as good, but I did a 19-minute overview of what I felt would be a bare bones budget, looking at line by line review. I did this for 15 years on the board, 10 years as chair. And I basically came up with a budget of $187,600, which included line by line of what's necessary to carry on this organization during an economic crisis that we're in now. The bad news for staff, and I certainly have, this is not an easy thing. The bad news is that it's going to be cutting back staff and administration. It provides basic maintenance for Christmas lights and banners. Essential communications, it pretty well eliminates events entirely for obvious reasons. Definitely what you're about to do is not going to be a fun exercise, but it will ensure, in my opinion, that the BIA is going to continue to operate, get through this crisis, and then move ahead. If we take a look at the impact of the 2020 budget, first, we can't forget that we had GM closing last year. That created a huge psychological impact to the community. Retirees were closing their wallets. I'm pretty sure, and our friend at the OBIA can say that no other BIA in Ontario had suffered a closure of this significance of a corporation of this size in Ontario. So we are in a very special situation. As a result, the commercial property taxes in the downtown BIA are 11% higher, and I've done the calculations. I've checked in, I've had property experts look at this. Our commercial rates are now 11% higher than any other part of the city. That includes Costco, the RioCan Center, the Costco Center, the shopping center, 11% on top of commercial taxes. When I hear that, red lights start to go off. Keeping in mind, I led 2 property tax appeals that benefited all the property owners in downtown Oshawa and all the businesses. And the reason I ran those tax appeals is that back in those days, the tax assessments were unfair. It's all about fairness. We're not asking for favors. We only want to be on the same level playing field. Now that we have an 11% tax over and above everyone else, this is beginning to raise another problem, and that's fair taxation. So now I need to talk a little bit about capping, because that's impacted many businesses. You've seen the list. In all the years I've been involved, we've never pitted large properties against small, and that's what this is doing. It's an expedient way to raise funds, but it's it's fundamentally unfair to do it in one fell swoop, and it certainly doesn't build a community. It's really tearing people apart. So ultimately, the taxes are going to flow through to our tenants. It's going to impact the cost of future rentals. I'm not sure if that was part of your deliberations when you realized that. Now, COVID-19, I've talked to several businesses. I'm sure a lot of you people have. My business has been closed for over 2 months. Many businesses are still closed. I think the emergency is now until June 9th. So we have a lot of businesses that are not open, some that are barely open, and some that I don't know if will ever open. They're telling me that they're worried about paying their property taxes and expenses, and never mind the BIA tax. And believe me, my gut feeling, and I hate to say it, is that I think this is just starting. This is not going to go away. Layoffs. I've had layoffs, so you're going to have to deal with that too. First time in 35 years I've had to lay off my staff. It's heartbreaking. I don't want to do that. I've had great staff, and I want to bring them back. We just opened last week with modified hours. We're open like 5 days a week, and there's not enough traffic as of last week to stay open longer. And the reality is I can't bring back all my staff. We're tightening our belts. We're managing our cash burn, and ultimately we have to do letters for less. And I know I'm going over time. I appreciate another minute or two. Just so I don't want to read fast. I want everyone to be able to understand what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
I just need a minute or so.
Go for it.
I've read some of the letters supporting what the BIA is doing, and I agree. I think there's a lot of good things that the group are doing right now. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, it's just not fiscally reasonable at this point in time to run with 4 or 5 staff, either part-time. Remember, all of this stuff, most of this stuff, and again, what I'm seeing now was handled by one staff person with part-time help, and Glenn can verify that. We've had part-time help, part-time bookkeepers, summer students. Ultimately, again, we have to do more with less. Now, I'm not sure. I know, Ivano, you're on the Mayor's Task Force, and I know you're the BIA representative, and I'd love to hear, either now or later, what's been happening there, and what sort of, maybe there's some suggestions that have been coming to that are coming forward to help, to relief for the BIA. This is one that we can do. I'm also, I'm really concerned also about keeping the funds and distributing through different programs. I really feel uncomfortable about that. I know I don't know if that's the feeling of the group, but if you're going to not use the funds, if you're going to readjust the budget, please adjust it, take the hit now, give the information to council. I understand you have until June 11th to give the information to council so that they can make adjustments, they can hold a special meeting. It won't cost them anything because they will be able to print the tax bills. I think you have the June 11th drop dead date. The last thing, and I don't know if this is part of your procedure, Ivano, but I asked for, I didn't get it, is a copy of the general ledger every month, and I sent a form in, a copy of what we used to get, and Glenn will know about this. We used to get a page every month and ongoing of every check that was issued by the BIA, by it's just basically operating expenses. It's a great way for the board to look at what's actually been spent. It's also a good checks and balances thing. And I don't know if that's in your, I just raised this. I don't know if this is in your package. I don't know if this is it's certainly not a requirement to publish this because it's not published. It's certainly, from my experience and from the past board experience, it's been a best practice. And I just ask the members, the directors, if they don't have that information, when they're looking at where the money is, where the money's going to, where it's gone, that you should look at that. You should have that in front of you to help you make your decisions. So in summary, I really wish you good luck. This is going to be a very tough decision, and whatever you're going to do, I'm sure some people will be happy, some people are going to be unhappy. And you know, as I'm doing, I'm hoping for the best. I'm planning for the worst, but ultimately we have to get this done. And I really, if there's any questions you have, I have spreadsheets of everything that I've done. I've spent a lot of time on this, if you haven't figured it out, to try and benefit the BIA.
Okay. On that note, I'm going to ask if there's any questions from the board. You can raise their hand or send in a chat question if you like. I'll give it a minute. Any questions?
I have one.
Okay, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, and thank you, Daryl, for taking your time, and Louise, to come in and make the presentations this morning. It's just a question of perspective, I think. And, you know, you made the point about by removing this cap and elevating the fees basically on larger BIA members, and it pits those against the smaller BIA members. I'm just wondering, before the cap was lifted, and when it could be perhaps argued that the larger properties were under contributing, and thereby would that not put more burden onto the smaller members? So wasn't there a smaller against larger in the past, whereas this looks to more equitably balance the contributions? What are your comments on that?
Well, I have a couple things. First of all, I'm not in the top 21. And, you know, we share the pain amongst the group. So I understand that the impact for the smaller businesses are less. So bottom line, it's not to my advantage personally to recommend, you know, going back to the old way. And I understand that larger businesses, you know, they can possibly pay more. I guess the bottom line is, you know, using an example of the Oshawa Clinic, a question is, are they more value to the BIA, or is the BIA more value to them? And the question is, and if you don't know it, my understanding is the Oshawa Clinic is planning to move in the next few years, and we have Sue Lupton who can advise us if that's the case or not. But that's my understanding. But I understand, you know, if we look at the whatever hundreds of people who work at the clinic, if they, you know, those people are spending their lunches and their money and shopping in the BIA. What does the BIA specifically do to them? Well, I don't know. Again, I don't think they are helping them particularly a lot because they don't need their help. So on one end, we need the larger properties more than they need us. That's my opinion. The second thing is, and it's the same feeling I felt with the budget. Yes, the cap's been $5,500. And again, we're sort of kind of, the BIA should be more like a membership fee. I'm not saying we're like a Chamber of Commerce. Actually, we're not like a Chamber of Commerce because we can't opt in or out. But at some point, you have to say, where is the top? And I'm not disputing that should be reconsidered, Rick. Like I said, even with the budget, there should be a phase-in period. And if you watched my video, I used the best practices from the municipal tax assessment, where anytime there's a tax increase or a tax decrease, it's phased in over 4 years. And that would have been a lot easier as a palette, just generally before COVID-19, if we would have said, you know what, we're going to raise, let's say we're going to raise it to $10,000. I don't know. Or if you're going to remove it entirely, you say we'll phase it in over 3 or 4 years so that the businesses can at least understand and plan for it. The Oshawa Clinic, just so you know, had no idea that they were going to have a tax increase, an assessment increase that, by the way, is about $48,000. Is what they're going to pay when they were paying about $7,800. We called Mr. Warford in our just as a consultation to get his feeling on it. Again, by the book, the city sent the notice to the landlord. The landlord is supposed to advise the tenant. Didn't in this case. The tenant did not know, and they're a tenant, so they had no idea of what was coming. So their taxes, they pay $500,000 in property taxes. If you look at where they're at now, they're just around 50,000, just around 10, 11%. It averages 11% of the commercial tax. So their tax will be $550 this year. So if you're asking me about big versus small, the big guys were paying more, and can they pay more? Yes. My test, Rick, is fairness. What's fair? And giving people a chance to adjust. So I understand the budget needs to be increased. You want to do more. but it needs to be shared, and it needs to be shared fairly. What you're doing is you're going to chase away big business, or ultimately the property values. My property value expert has advised me that for every dollar that the BIA levies going up, the property value will go down. Sue, I'm sorry if you haven't, I wish you would have advised the BIA that, but I have a very experienced property expert who's very knowledgeable in Oshawa. We work with him and the law team for 2 tax appeals, and that's the bottom line. Our properties values are going to go down because we're not competitive.
Thanks, thanks, Daryl.
Good question. Thank you.
Any other questions around the table? Hearing none, do we get a motion to accept Daryl's presentation? Daryl, I should have told you it's being recorded and it'll get posted up as part of the public video that makes it a public meeting.
Sure.
Do I have a motion?
To accept.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Peter. Going around the table, Michael?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Peter, since you seconded, I'm assuming you're a yes?
Yes.
Rick, since you made the motion, I'm assuming you're a yes?
Yes.
Very good, and it's a yes. Thank you very much, Daryl.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck to everyone. And I think this is a wonderful process. I'm hoping you can do this again and include more members to participate. It's a great thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Amanda, do
you want me to leave? You want me to say goodbye?
Yes, if you don't mind, or we'll hang up on you.
I'll say goodbye.
Very
Goodbye,
good.
and have a good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
You, Daryl.
Bye-bye.
Kay Matthews is our next speaker and presenter, and she's already dialed in. Kay is Executive Director of the Ontario Business Improvement Area Association. Kay, thank you for coming in, and you're going to speak to us about what other BIAs are facing and doing out there. So, Kay, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. The last gentleman's comments and concerns, of course, I wanted to respond because, so I've had to put my safety belt on so that I didn't. There was a lot of comments. So I would like to kind of address a few things that's around the assessment and around minimum, maximum, as well as BIA staff layoffs. So at the end, I would like to come back to those 3 things if you're okay to let me do that.
Sure.
So just, to give you a bit of a foundation, BIAs became 50 years old, or will as of September 16th. The very first one being Lower West Village. And it was the idea that unlike a chamber where you opt in or out of membership, that you are able to actually have a sound amount of money that you could actually implement the work without having to run around trying to collect money from everybody. So you can see that the chamber are much better salespeople than the BIAs are, because they have to go after their members, and they have to also really make sure that the members are really, really happy. But the job of a BIA is not for the individual member. The job of a BIA, and Amanda's heard this of me many times, as has Angela, is to make the area a better place in which to do business. So that's basically the goal of every single BIA across the province. Happily, I'm going to tell you that it was probably one of the best exports that Canada has ever had. It's been a very silent export, but there are about 500 BIAs across Canada, about 1,000 in the States. There are BIAs in the UK, both Scotland and England. They're in Australia, New Zealand, they're in Germany, India. They're moving into China, Singapore, Belize. So it really has been a great export. And I significantly for me was sitting down with a couple of German planners who were implementing a BIA to renew and revitalize East Berlin, a city that had stopped 60 years before. Happily, I want to note that in Toronto, year after year, on an assessment base, the BIAs outperform the non-BIA areas. So the assessment value of the property goes up if there's a BIA in place in Toronto. I don't have those numbers for Ontario. They're very, very challenging to get. But we have certainly found significantly in Toronto. So BIAs are local boards of council. Number one, you answer to your local council. Basically, as my colleague at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs will say to me, a municipality gives you life, a municipality, and only a municipality can take away that life. So that is, that's who you speak to. That's who you have to get all of your approvals from. You'll notice in the Municipal Act, which is where the guidelines are for BIAs, that the membership gets to input on the budget. They get to vote for who they want on the board, but final approval of both of those things are on the council's side. So you need to operate yourselves like council does. You need to emulate them, and your communication, not only does it have to go to membership, but it clearly needs to go to your municipality. You are obligated under the Municipal Act to follow very specific governance rules, and I can go into that another day when you're going to give me 2.5 hours to talk, because it's a long conversation about that one. But I have been in the BIA world since the early 1980s, and I've seen significant changes, and one of the ones that I really love to talk about is BIA 1.0, which is the very basic BIA. This is where we started 50 years ago. We did sidewalk sales, we put up banners, and we called it a day. And most likely we were all tier driven. In 50 years, we've become professional organizations. We've moved from BIA 1.0 to 2.0, some are at 3, and we're moving up to 5. You have to think about a BIA as a very professional ship that we need to steer in solid governance foundation. But we're also a unique body. Number one, we are the only local board that self-funds ourselves. So very rarely, or not very rarely, but most often, our finances do not come from the general taxpayers. They come from a very specific group within a very specific geography. That makes us unique in the municipal world. And that is something I think we need to celebrate, and we need to remind our council about that as well. So you can't necessarily be lumped in with the library, the police, all of those other things that are paid for out of the general taxpayer dollar. So we are making significant public realm investments over and above what the municipality normally does. So we are a very special group of people, and we are run by a very special group of people, that's you, the volunteers. What we're also very interesting is that our BIAs are one of the greatest public-private partnerships there is. So there's a little bit of a challenge sometimes in that you have entrepreneurs who are used to making decisions in their everyday business at the drop of a hat. But now you've entered into a municipal governance system. So there needs to be respect both ways. Council needs to understand that that is a great creative force to be leveraged, that because you're entrepreneurs, because you're innovators, that you can do things in a very exciting and different way, much more quickly, and you're investing pretty much 100% into that local section as well. But on the other hand, the BIA needs to understand the governance around doing so. So very impressive meeting so far. That's really wanted to focus on that. So what are other BIAs doing? So we recently did, so OBIA has had to, of course, like everybody else, really change what we're doing around the table. As of March 17th, we went from monthly newsletters to daily newsletters. And I'm sure if you don't receive them, please, you're very, very welcome to do so. Just let Angela or Amanda know that you would like to receive them. They are chock full of information from the federal to the provincial to the municipal realm, sharing of best practices amongst BIAs across the province, because OBIA's underlying wording that we often jokingly say is that OBIA is all about R&D. Not research and development, but rip off and duplicate. So how can one BIA share with another BIA and actually take that work and move forward? So that's all we're about. So not only have we switched to do a daily newsletter, which is exhausting, But it is also a really imperative for us to do it. But we also do twice weekly best practice Zoom calls. We've had anywhere from 42 to 85 people on the calls, and they have been spectacular, where I introduce a couple of subjects and just let everybody talk. I think we're all webinared out, but the ability to be heard is really important right now. So taking the time to listen to your delegates earlier was a very, very important step for you to take. We all need to be heard during these times. So at this point, our BIAs are working harder than they ever have in their past. They are the feet on the street that are going to help build the recovery. Our BIAs are the ones that are advocating for their members, both municipally, both through OBIA and from the MPP and the MP's point of view. They are really trying to figure out how they can hit the ground running when the new norm appears. 96%, oh, sorry, I had something open. 96% of our BIAs, let me just switch over. My computer's decided to take a sleep. There we go. No, that's the other one. 96% are not deferring their levy. Understanding that their levies are not the same situation that you have, where you've taken this year to radically change it. So I'm not going to talk from your local level, but just to let you know that 96% at this point are staying the course. And OBIA is very much recommending to every BIA board that they add an accounting line to their budget saying COVID, so that you can track the work and the time that you're spending doing that. So that if there is any situation where, where there's any relief down the line, you can actually see how much money that you, both in administration as well in actual cashing of checks or sending out checks, have actually spent to help during the recovery and through this period. Our BIAs are trying to keep the faith and the morale up across the province, and they're doing things in wonderful and different ways. Some BIAs have created online marketplaces for their whole community for the retail aspect. And again, that's for a BIA that's very retail focused. Some of them are literally decorating. If there's been break and enters into some of the shops, they've been decorating the hoarding. They've been creating kits for their members. So, here's stickers you can put on the ground for physical distancing, for the posters, but they have been the conduit between all the information that's out there and getting that information to their members. So that's the one thing I'm finding, is that they're working harder than they ever have before. Let me just talk about a couple of other things that we've learned. The majority of BIAs are working on task force with their province and with their municipality. And if they weren't the ones working with their task force, who would be advocating for their area? So that is a very specific thing that BIAs are doing. Very few have laid off staff in our BIAs. There are a few. Some of them are around the events. But let's be clear, maybe our events won't look the same, but that does not mean we can't do activations and animations. So if we are encouraging, say, patios on the street, and we're encouraging larger patios, does that not mean that we can have animations or activations on a daily basis rather than closing down the street for 2 or 3 days and having a big festival? So it could be, and I loved in talking to Amanda, the idea of adaptive programming. So maybe the big events aren't for this year, but we still need to keep our communities vital. One of our BIAs is doing a traveling art situation where they have light shows, they have a van that's got different art on the side of it. So they're being really creative, because they're doing what they're best at doing, is being really creative and really trying to add vitality to a street, which will help us to recover at that point. And many of our BIAs, as they move into a more sophisticated and professional model, are also really the ones feet on the street, filling up vacancies. So it's what we call BR&E, business retention and expansion. So a lot of BIAs are doing that. So what I would stress for you more than anything is to look at your strategic plan in light of what's happening, reevaluate your strategic plan, and build your budget based on what you need to do in order to focus on recovery. I'm going to leave it there, but I know there's a ton of other questions that you may have, but I know my seconds are up.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that presentation. Let's open the floor to questions. Any questions out there?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Glenn.
So as I think you're aware of the situation where we had this cap and it got removed. What is the situation as far as caps in other BIAs in Ontario?
Well, many BIAs are reducing caps or getting rid of caps because they're, in many cases, it's inequitable. And I think the issue with the maximums being inequitable is when you have a multiple use location. Say you have a mall that has many tenants in it, but they're capped because it's one building. But they may be able to distribute that amount amongst all of the businesses. When you have a single occupancy building, maybe that's a place where a cap may work. For instance, I'm going to say something like the Eaton Center. So in the Eaton Center, they certainly have a special MOU and a cap specifically for them. But if you have a single occupancy one where you might want to consider it at that point. But what I very rarely suggest is an actual amount. I would always suggest a percentage of the budget. So if it's a single occupancy building, that their cap is that they will never pay more than, say, 6% of the budget or 12, whatever that number is that works for you. But when you've got a building that has multiple tenants, that cap now doesn't work. So you have a big building that's only paying $5,500 per million? I'm not sure what your cap is based on.
No, our cap has been just a certain amount and it's never changed for 30 years.
Right, and the cost of doing business increases every year, except for maybe this year, but normally there is a 1.3-ish cost of living that needs to be applied for every single one, and that's the other issue. So if you have a cap like that, it probably doesn't have a cost of living. If it's applied to a mall that has multiple tenants in it, that could have been distributed, does that mean each one of those tenants are paying $55 a year or $500 a year? Where they have actually a greater ability to evenly distribute that money across the board. So again, the single occupancy may be where it makes sense.
Great. Thank you for that, Glenn. Any other questions? I had a couple of questions, Kay, if you don't mind. Historically, I know the BIAs have been around since the 70s or the 80s. We've never had COVID, obviously, but we've had SARS, we've had other events like an economic crisis when it comes to the asset-backed securities in 2008 and some recessions in the 2000s. Any of the things we're hearing now ever show up back then around reduce, cut back, that kind of perspective, and what did the BIAs, from what you can recall, do back then?
So to be clear, even though the mechanism for BIAs, and that mechanism for BIAs was a tool that was created within the Ministry of Municipal Affairs because there was a problem, right? A BIA would never have been formed if everything was fine and everybody still shopped on Main Street. So there was a problem. The BIA legislation came in to solve the problem. That hasn't changed. Right? That problem still exists, and it's become even more challenged between online shopping, boxes, malls, all of those things that have caused some pressures on the BIA area. The idea of urban planning changed, and that's why Main Streets were challenged. But remember that the BIA is the Main Street. It is the street that has been there for, I can't remember, I don't know how old Oshawa is, but I'm going to say probably since the mid-1800s. So it has been through the Spanish flu. It has been through other pandemics. It has, and the key thing is that the BIA's work is to continue to build that resiliency. So when GM has struggles, and in places like St. Catharines and Leamington when they lost Hines, there have been many communities across the province who have had these same struggles, the mines up in Sudbury and the Thunder, and Timmins. So, we have all gone through these crises, and we will continue to go through these crises. But in this case, you have a tool. That tool is called the BIA, and it's best poised to implement the recovery.
And I do like your point around it's a collective, and you're going to hear from individuals, which is fine. I mean, we are the individuals represent or are representative of the collective, and it's more of an investment mechanism for the recovery. So, it's when I hear you describe it like that, and again, looking back in history and seeing that, these are tools that are needed to keep the recovery going. The other thing is I'm appreciative of the comments around what the other BIAs are doing, which is stay the course in terms of the majority side of it. So, my question around the investment side, is that really the BIA function? It's about investing, and this helps me understand. Most people who are affected by COVID are not doubling down; they're actually restraining and pulling back, and so their mindset is about scale back, pull back, shrink. Whereas the BIA appears to be more of a, this is about helping the recovery and coordinating and being the medium by which a lot of the recovery happens.
The job of a BIA board is very challenging, because one of my favorite sayings is that the world is divided by people who think they're right. But you have been duly elected to make the decision on behalf of the board. You've been duly elected, and you've been appointed by council, and they have looked at what you're doing, and they've told you to stay the course, or they've suggested that they're not at this point looking for you to change the course. But that is something that you have to do as a collective. You need to figure out exactly what it is. But again, you need to listen to your members, but you have to look at it from a completely open point of view. My concern over submitting a public statement about what checks that you write every month, that's totally outside of the Privacy Act for salaries. So you really have to be careful about that, and you need to double check with your municipal clerk as to what information that you can provide. Generally, it's the audited financial statements. But so you have to be very wary about that. And remember, BIAs are local boards of council, which means that we're in a little bit of a gray zone, and we really can't collect CARB. And I'm saying I'm with a not-for-profit organization. BIAs are not-for-profit organizations. They are not under the Ontario Corporations Act. They are 100% under the Municipal Act. Therefore, they're part of the municipal grid, and they do not qualify for any of the CERB, the Qs at this point. So that's another thing that and maybe not everybody knows, because most people think BIAs are not-for-profit organizations, and they are very much not. So I think that's a distinction you need to understand as well as a board. So it's a bit different of a discussion, and back to my point, the world is divided by people who think they're right.
Just a quick question on the allocation or collection of COVID-19 costs. Your recommendation for a separate line item was interesting. Do you feel there'd be a recovery mechanism for that if we start booking costs to that line item?
I don't know what's down in the future. I think that's my. I think we all wish we had one of those all-seeing balls, but we don't. But we will be in a much better position, even as businesses, if we start to put a line item in our accounting that can show the impacts either way for you. And then if there is some recovery funding, some infrastructure funding that comes down the future, it's much easier for you to prove how things have changed in your world and your BIA's world.
Great. Any other questions?
I have one more.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Is there any, I'm not just quite sure how to ask this. Some have made the point that the Oshawa BIA can't have a governance board. In other words, we're supposed to be a working board and no volunteers, and we do all the work. what is OBIAA's stance on? Are we a governance board or are we a working board? Or is it a combination?
You are what you need to be at the time. So if you are a volunteer board, you most likely are an operating board because you have no staff to do that work. But when you have a good, strong strategic plan, when you have a good, strong direction on where you're going, what you're going to do is that strategic plan is going to help and inform you as to who you need to hire. And if the person that or people that you have hired maybe don't have the skills that are recognized in the strategic plan, it will guide you in what training that they need in order to be able to implement the strategic plan. Then your job at that point, you've got the staff, you've got the strategic plan. Your job as a board is to stay out of the weeds, is to be a governance board at that point. Having said that, OBIA has been very successful in a small project called Digital Main Street. And there'll be more news on that in the near future, I'm hoping, cross my fingers. But I have a governance board. So they don't tell me what I need to do every day. They respect me. They give me the strategic plan foundation. I've got my executive if I really need to bounce something off them. But when I was first, now be clear, OBIA is a very small not-for-profit organization. So when we first were entertaining the idea of taking on a $12 million project with the province, I had to say to my board, I need you to be operational right now. I need you to be down here in the weeds with me and help me get things sorted. And they did. And then once I got things sorted, they went back to their governance model of that one. But that doesn't mean that your committees are not in, you know, they're working, they're very, very operational. They're making their presentations to the board listens to it, the board decides on it. It really is not saying in the Municipal Act that you're either operational or governance. I think that goes back to that BIA 1.0 to 3.0. So it will change. It will be change, but you have all of your own businesses and things to operate. So, you know, by going by a governance model, that gives you time to focus on your priorities, plus assist and guide a board.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions around the table? Hearing none, I want to thank you, Kay, for taking the time to make the presentation. I need a motion to accept Kay's verbal presentation.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Glenn. As seconder?
Yes.
Thank you, Rick. Going around the table, Michael?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Rick, assuming you,
Yes.
great. And it's yes for me. Thank you very much, Kay. Much appreciated. If you have any materials to send to Amanda, she can post it, but this is obviously recorded and it'll show up as is.
Great. Anytime.
Thanks again. Moving on to the agenda, report of the chair. I'll just give a quick verbal update, just trying to catch up on some time. I didn't really ask this in the beginning. It's 9:30. I mean, we're going till 11. I think we're going to make it. Does anyone have to do anything beforehand? I don't think we'll lose quorum, but no one has any hard stops before then. We'll keep going. Quick update on the report by chair. It's been 11 weeks since we met before. You know, we've all seen the strain and the changes that have been happening. I want to thank the team, Amanda and company, for really pushing hard on keeping everything going. You've seen the chain of emails, you've seen the updates, you've seen the flurry of announcements, you've seen the requests by members in terms of support, whether it's for the hand sanitizers or other things, or direction on getting through to some of the programs and the $1 trillion that's released by the governments that are doing their best to get out there. You've heard some of the strong advocacy. Daryl talked about the Mayor's Recovery Task Force, Economic Recovery Task Force that we're on. Amanda's on the Regional Recovery Task Force in West Durham. Our website is being promoted as BIAs in the Durham region with strong advocacy work there. Really appreciative of you heard Kay talking about some of the elements like Digital Main Street and some of those things that are coming through. all these things have happened, over the last number of weeks. Certainly, we're going to, Cave summed it up correctly, we're going to see people all over the map on this issue. And one of the struggles we're going to have is trying to figure out, we're going to make enemies in some breaths and friends in another breath, is try to figure out what the best route is for our BIA to move forward. And the good news is we've had enough time of information to basically get a good handle on what the next half of the year is going to look like. Nobody has the perfect crystal ball. And again, I don't think we're going to make a decision that's going to be unanimously accepted by all. There's going to be some naysayers in that group that really are not going to be happy with the decisions we make. But that's what the job of the board is. So I appreciate the members around the table for at least having the courage to step up and evaluate it. Thank you for for your indulgence and sending you all the information that I had at hand. I am pleasantly surprised at some of the feedback we're getting from our members, as well as feedback we're getting from some of the surveys they went out, the Invest Durham survey in particular. I am pleased to see how Kay talks about what other BIAs are doing, and 96% of them are staying the course. Given that we're in a bit of a different situation where we made some decisions last year, it still is a stay the course up to this point in terms of the hard work that Amanda and the team have done. So thank you to everyone for being around this table, having the courage to stand up and actually make this decision as we go down the path later on to look at the go forward plan, and to Amanda, Angela, Carice, Tracy, for doing all the hard work that they've done. Amanda, do I need a motion for that verbal?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Can I motion my own, or no? Or do I need somebody else to do it?
Probably somebody else.
Okay, very good. Anybody want to put a motion? Thanks, Isaac. Seconder?
I'll second.
Thanks, Andrea. Michael?
Yes.
Isaac? Yep. Glenn?
Yes.
Andrea, since you seconded, I'm assuming you're good.
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And Rick?
Yes, please.
Great. Executive Director. Amanda, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so just one second while I open my page here. So I always struggle with my executive director report because I really oversee every program that's happening within the BIA and all staff and of course all the committees. So I'm just going to do a high overview and I'll let the committees get into their updates, and then I'll also give a larger COVID update directly following this as well. So we are continuing to do some major pieces like the strategic planning, the survey that goes out annually. Of course, we are working towards already a 2021 budget for next year, but that will of course play into the survey. So that's always working behind the scenes of what's going on. We've done a significant reach out to our members. I think one of the main priorities at the beginning of this, we were having an influx of calls from members, and they were asking everything from garbage collection to how do I access services through the federal government. So you can imagine the wide variety of topics we were getting. So we really started doing our newsletters, which I'll get into about the COVID and the COVID piece. But with that, we started reaching out to over 4,600 reaches to businesses over the 11 weeks. So every single week, we've called property owners and businesses. We've asked them questions from how are you doing? What can we help you with? What do you need right now? And just touching base with what programs are working for you or what can we connect you in with. This is probably the time the BIA has been the most connected into the membership. I'm very proud of our team. I know that it seems like a lot of work to call of these members, but they're so used to it at this point. We just kind of pick up the phone, we check in, and then we're on to the next one. And when there's summer students now helping us with that, it goes faster. I do want to say that the overwhelming support for the BIAs and the phone calls have resulted in increased participation, but they've also resulted in communications about the levy. So we have asked those members in the last week, have they heard about any of the information going out? What do they think about it? If they didn't know about it, we kind of update them. We want to get their thoughts on it. I want to be very clear to this board of directors or board of management, sorry, that outside of the comments that we have received written to date, we have not received any other complaints from the membership regarding the levy. And that is after us making the effort to actually reach out to people. So we have not received anything extra. In fact, we have actually had an overwhelming majority of members are more concerned in two areas, which is assistance with social media promotion and marketing while transitioning to digital services. And then also an increasing demand for programs and community building that will increase feet on the street for our BIA when we reopen. So this is precisely the mechanism needed now and in the future for our community's health. And there are more members now saying, what are you going to do in 3 to 4 weeks when we open up? Can we know now? Can we promote? Can we do social media takeovers? Can you advertise? We've had a really hard time on the staff team juggling the fact that we knew the board meeting was coming up and that you would be evaluating the budget and making sure that we didn't, that we left it open for you to still be able to consider all options. So whatever results from this meeting, we will hit the ground running. There's a lot we want to implement.
Is that it, Amanda?
It is, unless somebody has questions, and then you can do a motion to accept my presentation, and then I will move into the COVID report.
Great. Open the floor to questions.
I have a question. I'll turn my video on. That's a great report. Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you for all the hard work you've been doing. You mentioned 4,600 reaches, and you said the majority of property owners are okay with the levy, and you've offered your support. Obviously, you're tracking and logging all of these. Absolutely. And I was wondering if that could be made available to the board members, like a list of who you've contacted and kind of just a summary, because I'm assuming you have it already. Yeah. If that could be shared with us.
Absolutely. So I will absolutely share that to you. I just want to note that it can't be shared with anybody else because those are private numbers. So contact information that we have for our members, and some of them are private cell phone numbers. So
not necessarily the contact information, just who you've contacted. And
yeah, of course.
Yeah, 4,600 reaches that's a lot.
Yes, it is. So, and that's like obviously multiplying. So, or not multiplying, but like on top of each other, right? And it has dissipated throughout the week. So we have seen a decline just because either we go to voicemail and somebody will message us saying, got your voicemail and we don't need to talk, we're good. Or maybe a business, somebody's on vacation or whatnot. I mean, we're still getting substantial numbers. So we're still in around 200 to 250 calls right now. Whereas at the beginning we were closer to 400 and 450 calls.
I think just another perspective is all about transparency. So I know we hear conflicting reports as to how many people are opposed or for the levy, or how many people are complaining and not complaining. So I think if it's possible, obviously you're logging all of this anyway, to just make the whole process transparent, and if at all possible, share kind of with us so that we have a better indication of who's for or against, if it's in a certain area or certain types of businesses, or just to enhance our awareness and knowledge of who's for what and against what, as opposed to just grouping it as the majority or the minority.
Absolutely. And I think another easy way to see who we've been calling outside of property owners is also the list that we put on Facebook too. So you'll see weekly we put up, this is who's open. And we do it for retail services, food services, general services, professional service, like it's all always put up there, educational, for example. So we don't put somebody up on that list unless we've personally contacted them, because we need to update their hours. So you'll easily see every week, like, okay, this is who the BIA has called, in addition to property owners and anybody who does not want to be on that list.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question, Cindy. Just maybe in a follow-up on that question, Amanda, with the number of volume of touches and the request around the sort of the log, is it fair to say you've touched every one of our members that, or had an opportunity to touch every one of our members in terms of getting some feedback?
Well, that's a good question. So I would say that we have a fair representation of members on the levy. Now, obviously we weren't asking them at the beginning, at the height of our participation, everybody about the levy in March and early April. So those calls have diminished, but I would say that it's a significant amount of people that we have reached out to, certainly over 200 about the levy.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, can I ask a question? If I know it's Peter here.
Go ahead.
So Daryl mentioned that the top 21, and this and part of this discussion, of course, centers on the big versus small. And I'm just wondering, when you're reaching out, are you hitting those groups as well, the top 21, and are there noticeable differences in their assessment of the situation and the proposed budget?
Good. Yes. Thank you for asking that. In particular, there was one of the letters of that was in the correspondence is from one of the property owners. So I believe, actually, I don't want to state the address if that's okay on camera, but you'll see it in the correspondence. He's on there. And then it's really hard because a lot of those 21 properties are Revenue Canada, for example, or like, who do you talk to at Revenue Canada? The Go Transit building, and the owner of the, well, actually, I don't want to go into personal, like smaller owners, but so yes, we have reached out to a significant portion of that list without saying their names. But then on the flip side, we also have no contact for those larger organizations that are government related. And also, I haven't reached out to city-owned properties because those are obviously owned by the city.
Thanks for that, Peter. Any other questions?
I have a question. This regards to the safety and break-ins that have been occurring in downtown. Do you have any numbers on how many break-ins have been reported to you, increase on that, and is those numbers seeming to go down, or are we getting increased foot patrol by the police? Can you just give us a quick update on that, please?
Yeah, do you mind asking me at the end of my COVID report, or would you like, I can definitely answer that now, or I just wanted to.
No, if that's going to be brought up and discussed later on in the meeting, that's great.
Perfect. Okay, I'll answer that in the COVID report.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Sue.
So Amanda, just sort of back on one. So out of the property owners who will encounter a very large increase in June. If you take out the pills that some of the government, there's still a lot of privately owned ones. So have you not had a discussion with any of those ones?
So I'm a little bit torn right now because I don't know whether or not to single out an individual. If the board would like me to speak on. It's very hard because I don't know where my private, like I don't know where privacy is in conversation. So
I don't think we need to know who. I don't think we know to know who. I think Sue's question was, have you? And I think you're saying yes, you have.
Yes, I have. So
okay, is that fair enough, Sue? I don't think you necessarily want to know who it is.
I don't need to know the names. I know all of the names.
Yeah.
So I don't need it on. But I just am curious if you've just reached out to one, I'm understanding, out of those.
So we've received one letter. We received one other one on that list who was concerned about the levy and wanted to know what was going to be happening. And I can share that private name with you in an email. I believe that's adequate. And then we, of course, already knew about and I feel confident saying this because it was in council chambers. We, of course, had a presentation by the medical group stating that they were very happy with the BIA, that they wanted to be included in the BIA. However, that increase in 2020, of course, was substantial. And they have adjusted with their parking, I believe. There is one smaller owner on that list who did not call us back regarding that levy, who is very, I wouldn't say active, but is known in downtown. And so we don't have their input.
Okay. Sorry to add on to that, if we go back to prior to the budget passing, those private business owners were consulted for the majority of it beforehand. And what kind of, just a recap on prior to the budget passing, what was the sentiment from them then? Obviously, those could have changed now in the light of COVID, but were those business owners aware of the impact that it was going to have on them at that time?
Yeah, so good question. So so I'll start from the beginning. So we have obviously committees in place that are open to the public and that are advertised for people to join in for. We also had a budgeting process last year. That process obviously happened over July and August. In September, the board met, which is a public meeting, and is also advertised, and it was advertised that we would be going through the budget. And then that was approved. And then after that, we had 2 special meetings that were mailed to, and this was not only hand delivered, but also in addition to, they were mailed out to every single address and every single business. So those 2 special meetings happened. And then in addition to, once the city clerk started the process for notification, the city also sent out letters to everybody stating what was happening in detail. And then all of that information and all of that budgeting, if you actually rewind to June of 2019, was based on a survey that went out to the membership. So not only was it electronically delivered, it was also sent out in email multiple times. It was in our newsletter. It was also a social media. And then I'm trying to think what else. Oh, and then we of course had our AGM. So which was one of those 2 special meetings. So we had our AGM where we presented the budget. We had one of our largest turnouts. And then of course we went through, I believe, 2 council presentations. So we had the one in October, November, and then we also had, I believe, a follow-up in February.
Okay.
Can I just make one comment, Michael? Because I think, just as an aside, I was one of the unlucky ones who made the short list of the significant increase in. I know it's a bit of an anomaly because I'm on the board, but I didn't know that I made that list until an unofficial document had been circulated. So I'm not sure if everybody who was on that list was privy to knowing they were on that list prior to. We were all aware that the levy was going to increase, but I'm not sure everybody on that list knew. I didn't know personally. So I don't know if that answers your question a little more specifically to those who were hit hardest.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's more where I was directed at whether they understood the removal of the cap was going to make that impact.
Yeah.
And if I could just jump in, maybe I'll just, and to Amanda's point, Amanda, you're totally correct. There was a lot of communication done as it went through the complete correct process. But let's be honest, people do, and we actually not only sent the letters, talked to a lot of the larger ones, but let's be honest, people don't read, and it doesn't come until when they get hit, which is in June. And I think probably back to Peter's comment earlier, I think just maybe it's important to differentiate is that everything was passed, but now the world has changed. And Amanda, I commend you for all of the reach outs you're doing to businesses, but I think right now it's really critical to reach out, not just to the smaller, but to the larger ones. And all you need to know is that the larger ones are the ones who will be hit the hardest, and they will be. Is I think it's important to reach out to them. I'm receiving phone calls with some of the larger who say, well, oh my gosh, I just found out about this, because they didn't pay attention to it. They did receive the communication. So just back to Peter's, I think that you really want to chat and communicate with the larger ones so you have a well-balanced communication.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you for that. Any other questions? Hearing none, do we have a mover for the report of the executive director?
Yes, I will do that.
I got Michael, and is that Rick? Thank you. Around the table, Michael, since you've raised it, I assume you're good.
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
And it's yes for me. Thank you.
Sorry, who was the seconder again?
Rick.
And who was the first?
Michael?
Thank you.
Do you want to get into your COVID special report, Amanda?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm trying to minute take and manage my reports here at the same time. Okay, COVID-19. So since the last board meeting, a lot has transpired, including, of course, the events of COVID-19. So after initial direction and leadership, thank you, Andrea. I really want to recognize that. She was the one who called it before everybody else and said, you know, maybe we should cancel this meeting because of health concerns. The clear message was from the world was to stay home. So hers was actually the first committee to kind of take action. And then we started shutting down committees afterwards. However, I have been giving updates to the committees and staying involved with them individually, and just letting them know and that we're carrying on with their work plan that they had provided us previous, and that we were carrying through any motions or anything. So we'll be updating you on those activities. A lot of our COVID-related updates are revolving security, but then also marketing and advertising. So those are two of the areas that our members have needed the most during this time. So as of right now, because everybody's at home and everyone's using social media, our social media has actually shot up significantly. So on average, week over week, we're seeing about a 42% increase over our last year's numbers. Our audience is, of course, rising. The marketing committee will be getting a full analytics report, hopefully for June, if we're meeting virtually. So I'm looking forward to that. We've done some pieces around, so we've done 50 comprehensive emails, so that's those daily emails. We receive newsletters from everybody from FedDev, OBIA, the Chamber of Commerce, the region, the city. All of that information was coming really quick, fast, and furious at our members. So we really took all of that information and we synthesized it into what do our small and Main Street and bigger businesses in downtown need right now. And so our communications person actually puts that out, which is an incredible feat in itself because we only typically put out one newsletter per month. And we collect that data. So to put that out daily has been amazing. Our response rate for those emails sits at anywhere between 50 to 75%. So just depending on if there was a big news item that day and they wanted to read more details, or maybe a program was opening through the federal government, they know to look out for it. The shift actually in those emails has turned towards, where do I get PPE? Who do I speak to? What partners can I partner with, or other stakeholders can I partner with to get some adaptive programmings or business? We have some great businesses in downtown who are providing PPE, like Lev2, who's owned by Big, who owns some properties in downtown. They're doing plexiglass shields, which we're sending out hopefully today or tomorrow. And we collectively have responded to about 254 emails that we've kind of put, that's from me just looking at the Google or our office on my side, eliminating board member emails and city emails. So that's pretty much what I can tell from businesses and property owners. So at the start of the COVID, we were getting some businesses who had tickets when they had delivery drivers park outside of their business. So we asked the CAO of the city whether or not he would enforce free parking, and thank you to Sue and Kyle for assisting with that. I believe those will be lifted, or the free parking will be lifted whenever the state of emergency is. I'll let them update in their city report on that. We've done a lot of advocacy work. So we had a sharp incline at the beginning of this of incidents in downtown, break and enters. We did have some vandalism. We've had graffiti work. Welcoming Streets has been incredible in this. I will let Cindy take that in her committee report. But we have seen that level out and actually decline over the last couple of days. We are seeing more people though on the streets. And again, I'll let Cindy take that over, and Sue will probably want to jump in on that. But the break and enters have gone down. The bylaw officers were extended into the evening. The police, our police liaison, because we're lucky enough to have a Durham Regional Police liaison for the BIA was actually asking officers in the evening time, if you have reports to fill out because you can't go into the police station, can you do them in your car in downtown parked on a street? Just to kind of have that visual there. And then they were using different routes, and they were really going into areas that they hadn't normally gone into. And I really applaud the Durham Regional Police, Welcoming Streets, and some of our other stakeholders that assist. And of course, Canadian Protection, which is a security agency in downtown, has done incredible work. So they are contracted out through multiple stakeholders, and they also do the security for our events. And they have been assisting the Durham Regional Police on that front. And they also have cameras throughout the downtown. So we've been doing that. We responded by fencing off the back. Well, I shouldn't say we, the mayor and the city moved fast after we asked them to fence off the back of the Canada Post Office. And we were really seeing some increase in and around Salina, Bruce area, in and around Memorial Park. Again, it's not a perfect scenario, perfect world, but those levels have kind of started to drop of any incidents. We now sit on 3, so to move into the economic development piece of it, we sit on 3 recovery task force. So we have a city, a regional, and then we also sit on a provincial, like the advocacy board piece for OBIA. We have made dozens of calls to our MP and MPPs. I know Ivano has been on those calls with me. I spent a Saturday, thank you to Jennifer French. I spent an entire Saturday crafting a letter with her. So, MP Colin Carey obviously sent a letter and read it out in the House on behalf of downtown Oshawa. So we have had some big pieces there, and that was published, of course. We've also done a number of letters and co-authored those letters, drafted them or proposed them directly through these task force. And they've all been available on social media or in our emails, but I can, of course, send those to the board if you would like to see them. To assist members, we've undertaken several social media campaigns, which I know Isaac and Matt were heavy, like were involved with those or know of. So we did a photo shoot campaign. A lot of people were taking photos from their homes throughout the pandemic. So photographers were coming in, they were like front door family photos. We did the same thing, but for businesses. We put no paid promotion behind some of them, and we got incredible organic reach. Our video that we put out saying thank you to healthcare workers, we put no paid promotion on it, and we received a 50,000 person reach, and then we added on money on top of, and we received additional. We've also done a coloring book contest, which there are some of them that have, and these coloring contests essentially are downtown landscapes photos that were done by the Community Living Art Room. So they were local students from just outside the catchment by like 10 feet, but we worked with that group, and they made those for us. We provided gift cards for the winners to local restaurants for people to try. And then we also are regular contributors on groups like the Whitby Oshawa Takeout Group and all these other ones. We've also done a lot of preparation for a BIA toolkit, but unfortunately that's been put on hold until the budget is decided today. So that's everything from like stickers on the ground for like stay so many feet apart and just things because our businesses don't know where to purchase them or how to make them. They don't have the resources, where it's quite easy for Taylor to create those on Adobe Illustrator, for example. She has that skill set to be able to do that and just get that ready. We also want to give, I want to give a huge shout out to All or Nothing Brewery. So they supplied us with hand sanitizer. We got the bottles, the spray bottles that we purchased out of our miscellaneous funds, and then we ended up distributing those to many, many members to the point where we had to do a second round. Now we've let off the gas on that because it's more readily available for people to purchase, and All or Nothing has made those available for anybody at this point. But in the early days of COVID, of course, everything was in short supply. So, and it was very hard to get those materials or to get any PPE unless you were a larger organization with ties or connections into those fields, for example. So, I mean, that's just a very broad glimpse of what we've been doing on top of the membership calls, on top of all of the communication, and on top of all of our other things, coming up with adaptive programs, which you'll hear about through Andrea for events. And then, of course, the daily things that we do, like the strategic planning and our regular social media and everything like that. And we also do social media takeovers during COVID as well.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Any questions from the board? One question around Kay's suggestion of creating a special COVID account. I don't know if we've done that already, Amanda.
We haven't, and it's quite brilliant. So regardless of what happens today, I would suggest that each committee look at doing that.
Okay, I'll leave that to you to set it up. The other thing is, did we get any traction on the region's decision for a 25% levy offset or funding offset for the levy? Or maybe that's Rick's update from the city or the regions.
No,
item.
and that just goes, and I apologize, that just goes to show how much we're doing, because I didn't even talk about, and I'll leave for Isaac to talk about Downtowns of Durham, but I highly suggest that you all go onto that website. So it's downtownsofdurham.ca. It's something that we launched, but just going into, and there's just so much that I didn't even cover, and I apologize. Sorry.
Fair enough. Any other questions? Hearing none, do we get a mover for the COVID special report? I'll move. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thanks, Rick. Around the table, Michael?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Rick, assuming you seconded, you're good?
Yes.
I moved it, so I'm good. Passed.
Before you go on there, is there any chance we could do a 2-minute break?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is everyone good for that?
Yep.
Why don't we take a couple of minutes and come back in a few? Okay, we're back on. I have a conflict in 11A1. So Rick, Glenn, do you mind taking over the chairmanship for that particular item?
Okay, so I'm going to do a small economic update, and then we'll get Amanda to do the Winter Festival of Lights and the Center Street construction update. So on the economic side of things, there's not anything too much to report other than that the winner of the Discover the Space contest, Jen Gillespie, she's been very, even though she's been held back a bit by COVID, she's been very proactive on Facebook, social media, getting her space ready. There was an agreement that there was no rent to be paid by her or by the BIA until she's able to open, which I believe would be very soon, because I think her industry is now able to operate as of Monday. But she sent she sent correspondence in, just saying how much the BIA has helped her, that they've been there to support her, offer solutions when she encounters issues, and that she's quite appreciative of the help of the BIA. So by all accounts, it looks like she's going to be successful, and we, of course, the BIA has been doing everything they can to help her on that success. So that's it for economic development. So now we'll ask Amanda to give us the beautification update, which is the Winter Festival of Lights.
Thank you, Glenn. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. This project crosses over pretty much every single committee with the exception of Cindy's, but I believe at some point it probably will go into hers. Essentially, when we were purchasing the lights, we started looking at the infrastructure in the park. and we recognized that there was not enough infrastructure for all of the lights that we are purchasing. And we really required some services to be able to figure out what is needed, how much it would cost, and whatnot. I want to make clear that I went through my contact at Oshawa Power that is not Avano. So one of his engineering associates, who is my main contact for everything, so that I'm not creating a conflict of interest for him or putting him in a position. So this was done basically pro bono, and I thanked him for that. Essentially, he did the first part, which is what would it take to actually bring the power into the park. So it's about a cost of about $10,200 and change. That's in that full document. You can see that he split it into quadrants through the actual technical specs. So you can see that it's in 4 quadrants of how the lights will work. Now, this is a significant purchase on behalf of the marketing committee and the beautification committee. So it does need a lot of power. If we do not go with this option, we could go with a plan B, which is going throughout the downtown. This option that is presented in the technical specs does not include the estimated $20,000 for construction within the park. So that's a quote and diagram that I am also getting as of right now for more information for those committees. So right now it's just letting the board know that I've gone ahead and looked at the infrastructure in the park, and that depending on the budget, I know Andrea and Jeanette will be talking about how they want to proceed with that.
So is there any questions for Amanda on the winter, on that Festival of Light?
Just a quick question. Do you have an estimate on the removal of what the cost is going to be to take everything down again?
So the actual full cost for install and removal is in that budget line. It's already in a separate budget line.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding that? Okay, so do you want to move on to, is there something on the Center Street construction, Amanda?
Yep, so I just wanted to let you know that in addition to any COVID activities, we also met with the region. I believe Sue was on the phone call for that. They just let us know that they would be doing construction in 2021. They have no firm dates. They are just putting together a plan preliminary with like who needs additional services and what does the BIA want, if anything. We have no further details. There's nothing to do on this action. We did receive a letter from Mr. Sherman about how he does not want the construction on Center Street. At this point, we have no information on dates, times, or anything like that. So once that becomes available, I will make that, I will make sure that the board and that our membership receives it. We did do calls for the region because they did ask us to call everybody on Center Street to see whether or not they needed additional services or infrastructure services. We did do that, and we basically just passed along information if they needed it. So when I say information, contact information to the regional engineer person dealing with that project.
And do we know where on Center Street and what they're doing?
I'm actually going to defer to Sue on this one.
Okay. Sue, do you want to just fill us in quickly on that? You have to unmute.
No, I know. I just a little slow at it. We don't have a lot of information. It's being, we've been on a couple calls. It's being, as you know, it's a regional road, so it's driven by the region. They're not looking, because I think actually Kyle, you were on one call, Amanda, myself. So they are not because if they're digging up the road, they have to dig up the road because they have old infrastructure, and so it is an emergency. They will have to do it, so they will be doing it in 2021. Once the drawings are not complete yet. Once they are, they will then go to the engineering team at the city, and then we'll have more information, because we were sort of pushing, will be a great opportunity to get streetscape obviously involved, that we can widen sidewalks and things like that. The city is only responsible for the sidewalks, so there's not a lot of leeway for the city. When we get more information, I'll keep you updated, but it's a project that will go ahead with the region in 2021.
But where on Center Street though?
It'll start at the, I guess it's called Brock Street, Glenn, on the north side, the bend. And it will go down as far as King Street. So our issue with the conversations, and actually, Ivana, you were on one, because the conversation that we've had, for example, we've looked at entrance points of downtown and how to improve that from beautification. As you know, we've got our 4 points, and so that's one point coming in to your entrance of downtown. And as you know, it's kind of got I call it the 70s island there. And it would be a great opportunity to do something really interesting there, but we don't know if that'll happen yet.
Okay.
So from Brock to King Street.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll turn it back over to Ivano to continue on with the governance.
Great. Michael, over to you on governance update. We've got 2 motions needed there. Go ahead.
Sorry, your mic was very quiet there, Ivano.
Oh, sorry. How's that? Sorry, does that work? We're handing it over to you.
You're back.
Handing it over to you for governance update. There's 2 motions there.
Great, thank you. So we'll be brief here. So the Integrity Commissioner City Report, it's in the package to the board. Basically, it looks like change in the Municipal Act back in March of 2019 had a requirement for municipalities to establish a code of conduct and appoint an Integrity Commissioner. So the City of Oshawa did that, and the Integrity Commissioner made a report with recommendations. That led to a report and recommendations from the Corporate Services Committee at the City Council. And they recommended, and I believe passed, a bylaw that the City of Council, Oshawa City of Council, adopt an amendment to their existing bylaw with their code of conduct to be in line with the City Commissioner's report. That involved a public complaint procedure and form, and access of directors and council members to the Integrity Commissioner services. You might be thinking, well, that's all City Council. What's it have to do with us? As a local board of management, we're directly included in all of those recommendations, and we fall under the purview of that as well. So we have to be aware of the code of conduct, the changes, and I look forward to providing the board with a more fulsome report as I look into this further in our next board meeting. Is there any questions on that before I move on to the next piece?
We'll need a motion for that, Michael, before you do the second one. So a motion to accept the Integrity Commissioner's report. Michael, I'm going to assume you're going to make that motion.
Sure. So can I have a motion?
It's Kyle here.
Thanks, Kyle.
Okay. Seconder?
Yeah, so just a question.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, I think I got cut off. So is this really just kind of receive for information, or is this to basically adopt sort of the recommendations coming out of the fact that, we've got to comply with or the ombudsman or the Integrity Commissioner sort of piece? So does it need to be a bit more directive versus just informational?
I would say at this point it's received for information. The board has to have a chance to look through the report in its entirety, and then I'll be working with City Council or the City Clerk to understand a little bit better what we need to do and provide a more fulsome report to the board as far as how it relates to us in the next meeting.
I mean, the reality is you have no choice, right? I mean, basically, as a local board, you're going to be, we're subject to this sort of piece. And so do we need to spin it out or just say, okay, it's done. That's just it. Let's just move on.
Well, it's in front of us for information. I get your point, Kyle. I would say it's in front of us for information. Let the board digest it. If there's any feedback or whatever, I think we'll provide that. Otherwise, we'll adopt it when we bring it back from governance.
Ask Amanda as well for any points
Okay.
of clarification on that. Have you discussed with the city clerk as what needs to absolutely transpire in this meeting?
So I did ask that question, and I do not recall receiving a email back in time for this meeting, whether or not, I do know we need a motion and that we basically have to adhere to it, but I wanted the exact wording of what that needed to be, and I never received a response back to date.
Well, I think to Kyle's point, it's not optional. We fall under city council. That bylaw applies to us. So I'll report back to the board next meeting. Regardless, perhaps with a little bit more informal, but I would say then my motion today would be to accept the Integrity Commissioner City report, as well as, I guess at this point, yeah, it's just to accept the Integrity Commissioner City report and to recognize and adopt that it applies to the Board of Management.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that motion?
A second.
Jeanette, going around the table. Glenn?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Jeanette, assuming that you've made the second, you're good?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
And it's yes by me. Thank you.
For me.
Yep. Michael, second item on the BIA ex official member status.
Right, so this was touched upon, or it wasn't touched upon, sorry. So the BIA ex officio member status, so as you guys know, we had ex officio members adopted by the board, which provided no voting power, but welcomed delegates from Durham College and Trent University to sit on the board. The city's made it clear to us that that can no longer, or can't proceed to move forward until the city has adopted that. It's under our bylaw that creates the BIA. The city has to appoint any members of the board. We have no official power under the bylaw to appoint an ex officio member. So we'll be working with the city to move that forward.
So you move the motion to send over the notification for ex officio status, Michael?
Yeah, can we have a motion from the board to consult with the city and request a motion to approve, or request city council to approve 2 ex officio members, 1 from each of Durham College and Trent University.
Thanks for that motion.
Mr. Chair, if I can.
Sure. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, so I think the city's looking for sort of particularly one thing right now, which is a resolution or some sort of action by the board that essentially says, yes, we want Trent and Durham to be board members. And then there's the status question that goes with that. So, I mean, ultimately, I think what the city is essentially saying is you sort of ask us to make some changes, and then we'll go back and we'll look at it, report on it, and bring it forward. So the questions in my mind are really kind of twofold. One is, I think everybody's very comfortable with Durham and Trent, as well as Ontario Tech being kind of around that table. But I think we probably need to treat them all equally, if you will. So, I mean, option 1 is they come in as kind of just full members, which will have a bit of controversy around it because they don't have as quite the downtown presence as Ontario Tech does. Or we move all 3 of the institutions into, yes, they're members because they're important to us, but they become a bit more of an ex officio piece. And, you know, in the bylaw, we don't have any ex officio sort of status for members at this point. So that's a change that we'd have to make. But I think we just need to kind of keep everybody kind of in the same space, if you will, versus trying to create 2 different levels of things between these institutions. So I just wanted to table that for some conversation.
Okay.
Yvette, yeah, so I might have a conflict of interest in this one. I mean, I certainly enjoy working with everyone, and
I don't think so, Peter. This is
yeah. I mean, our presence is much more pronounced than the other two, obviously. That being said, I understand what Kyle's saying about the fairness issue, or about, I guess, equal representation. So, you know, I'd rather, I guess I'll stay neutral on this, and just I'm happy to go whichever way the board recommends.
So Kyle, just to get your point, it's a preference from the city. We've already decided there were 2 ex officios and one voting board member. You're saying the direction's coming back from city, or no?
Well, I think, you know, we gotten the request from Trent, we got the request from DC, essentially saying we'd like to be, you know, as you know, represented on the board in some form or fashion, and that was fine. And then I think earlier in the year, the board, through their constitution, gave you guys had a bit of authority to do kind of that ex officio thing. And then we got back into the clerks and said, okay, fine, great that they did that, but they're not allowed to do that because you just don't have the authority to do it. It's got to go back through city council in terms of board composition and sort of representation and all of that. And that's built into bylaw 74, whatever it is. So we're probably gonna have to change that bylaw. And I think what the city's looking for from the BIA is, here is our request to do that. And what is that request, so that we can respond to it. I don't think it's gonna be, there's a lot of controversy around the BIA right now, but I think in terms of membership, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. We just need to know which way you guys want to go so that we can respond and start to move forward in terms of, you know, amending whatever we need to amend.
Well, yeah, I think well, my sense is we've already made that call, but unless you want to put it back on the table to equalize all of them one way or the other, which, you know, I would back Peter's comment. I wouldn't want to strip out Ontario Tech's voting rights that they have today to bring them down to ex officio. And then the other point made, and we talked about it at the board meetings when we went to ex officio status, they have, Trent and Durham College have yet to have a significant presence in buildings downtown, unless they've changed their mind there. They might. So we decided, but I'm open to revisit that if people want to.
I believe the comment.
And maybe it's a two-part piece. And sorry, Michael, but maybe it's a two-part piece. One is that the board is interested and willing to have ex officio members, and then secondly, that Trent and DC would come in kind of under that category. And so maybe that's the request to the city at this point, that we look at, you know, establishing an ex officio category. And then part 2 is that, and here are our first 2 ex officio members.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I believe when we're just recapping the discussion that we had initially, the prior board meeting, to both of them isn't been as ex officio members. I think the idea was, since they don't have that footprint downtown, we wouldn't want them to have the voting power such as Ontario Tech does. But at such time that they do decide to move any sort of campus or put a presence in the downtown core, that we would want that to change. So thinking about that, then we're going to be going back and forth to council to amend our bylaw. Again, if Durham College or Trent does come into downtown, I think that's something that we would have to do, but would open that up for discussion as far as the going back and forth to city council goes. I think.
Ivano, can I say, I think there is some possibility, longer term, of course, you know, this year's absolutely different than any other, but longer term, I think there is some possibility that DC might have a much more active presence downtown. Trent, I'd rather doubt, you know, because they're already established a campus, basically, and are building that, right? So, and I know the dean there very well. We're in constant discussions about what's going on. I would say overall, if I said I'd say neutral, but I'll say this. If it is a question in the long run of whether all institutions have equal status, then it's better to have us all ex officio, because it wouldn't make sense to have 3 votes from a sector that basically doesn't even pay into the BIA directly, right? So that I think would be highly problematic. So I'd rather go the ex officio route if we all have to go the same route. If we can go this other route, however, it does raise this question of whether, and I'm not sure what other BIAs do about this, about ex officio members, but it does raise the possibility, once you've established that potential, that there could be other companies and so on that might want to come on board as well, even though they're not paying, right? So I just raised those issues.
Thank you, Peter.
I just actually maybe Kyle, this maybe I'll jump in on a second here. So we know that this has to be council approval for the 2 members, but I think that we need to have more of a discussion with the city clerk, because according to the city clerk, there is no such thing as the ex officio. Is that they're on the board, they're voting member, or they're not on the board. So if I remember correctly, the premise for bringing them on the board is that they would be non-voting. According to the clerk, that doesn't exist. You're on the board or you're not on the board. So maybe, Kyle, we've got to have more of a fulsome discussion with the city clerk, or that becomes making an amendment to the bylaw.
So what I'm going to suggest, and it's a good point, Sue. So I think what maybe we're looking for the board from today is just that it's kind of a 2-phased with some caveats in that, or conditions that, yes, we are interested in an ex officio category, and the city needs to look into that, to Sue's point around sort of the city clerks, whether that's that or whether they need to be full members. And then secondly, to Peter's point, we should probably put all the institutions in the same category, whichever one that turns out to be, sort of full voting or sort of ex officio if we go that route. And there's, and to Sue's point, there's a fair amount of question around that whole ex officio thing. And at some point we're going to have to change that bloody parent bylaw to reflect all of this.
Okay, so it sounds like through governance back through Amanda to the city clerk that you're going to explore the ex officio status as point number 1, and then the second point being the consideration of at least Trent and Durham College in terms of adding them. And then there's I think there's one more piece, which is, do we want to equalize all of them? Because we've decided not to do that at this stage. But it's clear that if we can't create an ex officio, we've got to do something else. Rick, go ahead.
Yes, I think there's one piece that hasn't been mentioned so far. And while Durham College and Trent do not occupy property downtown, and therefore not in the same position as UOIT is, there's a communication piece here. And one of the things that we mentioned was the possibility of those 3 institutions having a joint orientation week, Frosh Week celebration, and that potentially taking place downtown. And to facilitate that kind of discussion, it would be good to have all 3 institutions at the table to have the immediate input, rather than try to chase people down, after a meeting and bring their feedback back to the next meeting. So whilst I favor the ex officio piece for Trent and Durham, because of that, I wouldn't like to see UOIT go from a voting member to a non-voting member because of their property status. So I agree with the tack we're going to take right now, which is to put this back to the clerk, get some clarification as to how we might make the ex officio piece work, and then to bring Trent and Durham in on that basis, at least to start. If in the future things change and either or both of those institutions decide to get a physical presence downtown, then it'd be easier to bring them on board from the ex officio status. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So there's 3 parts to this. Michael, is it clear for you?
Well, I don't know that we have a consensus of what the board wants. Does any of the board members want to weigh in on ex officio versus voting versus non, the 3 different options that we've kind of discussed today? Do I want to hear from anybody else on that?
I actually think we decided as a board. Like, I don't want to unravel or undo what we've decided. I think it's a question of follow up with the city. So I don't think I want to open up whether we take them off as an ex officio. That wasn't really the item tabled. So they're on our basis, they're considered ex officio, but it's not formalized to the city. So I think it's getting to it's the possibility of ex officio, and then the recommendation to get them on the ex officio, and then I think through the discussion we've got to determine whether we equalize them all on one plane or another.
Yeah, I think if I can just, I think I got to be really clear here. It doesn't exist right now.
No, I get it. So we've got to get.
So
No,
once council approves, then
I get it.
Figure it out.
Yeah, I get it. We got to do one step at a time. We've already made these people ex officio according to our rules and regulations.
Yeah.
So we haven't gone through the city, that we've got to do that step, whether that can happen and what that looks like. And if it can, then it goes to that. And then what I hear people saying is, we've got to look at some sort of discussion around equalization, possibly. So I want to bring that back through governance, but that's what's in front of us now, I think, unless somebody else sees something different.
No, and I think you're right. It's basically, do we have the authority to have sort of two categories of membership, full member versus ex officio, and the clerk's kind of saying no, but I've seen it done elsewhere, so I think that's a piece we take back. And then the second piece, to Ivano's point, is okay, who's in which category? So the first question is, can we do categories? And the second question is, who's in which category?
Agreed.
Okay.
What about other BIAs? Amanda, I don't know if you know, or in Welland, did they have ex officio? I'm just wondering what other BIAs do about this.
So my last BIA did not have ex officio, but I do know of other BIAs that do have them.
Okay.
So I think we just need to send the direction out, and let's get the information and bring it back. I doubt you're going to get a yes, no. I think you're going to get a whole bunch of caveats around whatever can be done, and then bring it back through governance and the board again.
Want me to take a stab at a motion then?
Yeah, at this point, we do need something from you guys back to us.
Correct.
So, whereas the board is interested in understanding whether we can have ex officio members on our board, the motion would be to open up discussion with the city clerk or city council to understand whether we can have an ex officio status, or if not, as bylaw doesn't allow it right now, understand how we can make those changes to allow for an ex officio board member status or board members.
You're moving it. Do we have a seconder? I'm happy to second it. Go around the table. Glenn?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Peter, I think it's not a conflict, so I think I'm going to table your vote. If it is, we'll discount it, but I think for now it's not a conflict.
Okay, I'll vote yes, but I'm happy to abstain if that's more convenient, but whatever's best.
No, I think it's still good because we didn't quite put anybody in those categories yet. It's just going back to the city.
Okay.
Jeanette?
Yes.
And Rick?
Yes.
Yes for me, and assuming Michael, who moved it, and Isaac, who seconded, are yes. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, just before we move on to that, could I ask that Michael work with Sue and I just to kind of craft the final language around that?
Michael?
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Great. Cindy, I know you've got a hard stop at 11. Why don't we move you ahead with community development ahead of marketing and communications? You want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I apologize that I do have to cut out, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet. Just reporting on Welcoming Streets on behalf of Haley. I had a discussion with her, and she's doing an amazing job. She's a strong asset to the board. So she filled me in on the initiative, some high-level stats that they're collecting. They've had over 2,200 client interactions. They've done 585 business visits. They've given out over 5,000 outreach supplies, and that includes things such as sleeping bags, food, drink, and hygiene products. So they have a strong presence downtown. Does anyone have a question on that? Okay. They also have freed up a Trent University student to work under Kyle and Sue. So they're going to focus on more of a communication strategy about the project, and they're going to help with activities that are aligned more with the downtown businesses to ensure that the businesses are included in the overall project. In discussions with Haley in regarding to the extension of the program, she recommends that the program continue. Now, considering the COVID situation and everything going on downtown, she feels it's not a great time to discourage programs such as this because the need is high, the demand is there. So she felt it would be in the best interest of downtown to definitely encourage the extension of the Welcoming Streets program. And I think there's a motion regarding the MOU.
Yep. Are you moving that motion, Cindy?
Yeah, so that's, I don't know how to do it formally or properly, but that's to extend the project and I guess agree to the MOU. I think that was circulated amongst the members. Everybody had got it.
So you're moving that we sign the extension, that the executive director sign the MOU extension for Welcoming Streets?
That was phrased much better, yes, thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. We have a seconder?
I do, second.
Thank you, Rick. Michael?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Cindy, assuming you're yes, since you moved it?
Yes, thank you.
Andrea?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
And Rick, since you seconded, I'm assuming you're good?
You assume correctly.
Thank you, and I'm yes. Okay, you've got that motion. Do you want to talk about stopgap?
Yes, so the Stopgap is a program to put ramps and to make the downtown businesses to enter their businesses. So Angela wrote a successful grant application for $10,000. So thank you, Angela, for securing that money for us. It's a definite improvement for downtown because, as you know, it's older downtown. There's a lot of stairs to get into, basic accessibility issues that can be overcome with this program. And we also had $5,000 set aside in reserves to do that. So these ramps will be contracted out for construction. They'll be painted in the BIA colors. We're in the process of formalizing a logo for them. We have funding for about 20 to 30 ramps, which should cover the majority of downtown businesses who require them. We also have a student who's going to be helping with this project over the summer. So they'll be responsible for listing the businesses where ramps are viable, and they're going to determine the best locations for the ramp. We also have to come up with an MOU outlining the responsibility and transfer of authority once the ramps are set up. So each business will be responsible, I guess, and liable for their own ramps. The committee didn't have much of a chance to delve into this. We just kind of started it when COVID hit. So in June's meeting, we should have more of a report for everybody. Are there any questions on the Stopgap program?
Any questions?
And there's one other item that's not listed on the agenda I just wanted to speak to super quickly, and that's the Backdoor Mission and the Oshawa Intercity Health Collaborative, Mission United. So that's a program at the Simcoe Street Church that provides essential services for Oshawa's unsheltered population. And it started during the COVID epidemic, recognizing that our unsheltered population may not be receiving the services and care that they needed. So they're providing washrooms and showers daily for anybody to use. They have a hot lunch program and food baskets. So they give out about 600 meals a week. They provide crisis support and a rest area. And there's, I think the big selling feature is there's a health clinic on site providing primary care and psychiatry for anybody who needs it at the time. Since April 20th, they've screened 443 individuals for COVID. And the medical clinic there has seen 165 people, they've had 165 appointments between April 20th and May 15th. So they average about 8 to 11 appointments per day. So they're providing really good services for Oshawa's downtown unsheltered.
Thanks for that update. They were tied in with Welcoming Streets because that was some of the things the ladies who are doing Welcoming Streets were tying in with, I think, in terms of a contact, right? That
I can't speak to that. That wasn't that. I'm not aware of.
I know there's a few different organizations that are involved in providing those services. So they very well might be one of them. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, so just on the stopgap piece, great, we got the grant. It sounds like an interesting program. This has come before the city every year for the last 3 years, and we basically have turned it down just because we can't get our minds around sort of liability and some of those other sorts of issues. So what I would suggest is that it's a great idea. You've got some funding to do it. I'm not opposed to it at all. We just need to figure this out, how it's going to work with our enforcement people and all of that. So I'd like to kind of throw that into a bit of a working committee, if you will, or a working group to sort of kind of work out some of those sort of details. Because I think it's a great opportunity. But, you know, if we're tripping people on the streets and they're breaking their heads and the city's getting sued, we're not going to be very happy. So we just need to kind of work out some of those details. So maybe we could throw that into a bit of a working group piece.
Yeah, that sounds good. So Kyle will be in touch with you about that and see what we can organize.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Wouldn't each ramp have to go through the permitting process, and that's when that would be done?
It's really sort of just a road occupancy piece, right? So we put these ramps out on the thing that go up to the doors. Well, then somebody's coming down the street and they trip over it. And so this is always kind of that municipal liability piece that we run into all the time, which is kind of why we had stayed away from the stopgap thing over the last year. I think it's got a lot of merit. It's really just how do we, you know, protect all the participants.
No, but wouldn't that be discussed and looked after when it goes through like you have to apply for a permit to put the ramp in? Wouldn't that department do all that?
And that's one of the questions, Glenn. I mean, at this point, we don't even know is there a process, is there an approval, or is this, you know, companies just go out and do it?
Well, I think there's precedence. It's been done in other municipalities, so we can see kind of what precautions they've taken and what they've done, and probably piggyback on established protocols and stuff. So I'm confident we can do it.
Yeah, I don't think this is unsurmountable. It's just I think we just got to do it right so everybody's got the level of comfort that they need.
Cindy's got it with you, I guess, as a follow-up as a working committee. So I think we're good. I think you're right. This isn't rocket science. We're not the first ones to do it. So I'm sure there's a solution for this. Thanks for pointing that out, Kyle. Anything else? No, thanks for that update, Cindy.
Not for me on that one.
Great. Thanks for all the updates and all the hard work. That sounds like we're getting good traction out there. You've got to leave at 11, right, Cindy?
Yes, I do. Sorry.
So you're going to miss some of the discussion that we're doing on the in-camera session. What's your preference? I hate to leave anybody out.
I can try to wrap up as quickly as I can and hopefully bounce back in.
Okay.
Depending on how long the reviews are going to take, I could shoot for that.
Okay, great. We'll look forward to you joining if you can, and we'll continue on. Thank you. So I suspect you'll just drop off when you have to?
Yes, yeah.
Great.
I'll just say I've got a similar issue where I'll have to drop out at 11, but try to jump right back in when I can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Isaac. Yeah. Marketing and communications, Amanda.
Oh, Ivana, sorry, could I just jump in through you, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Just thought, because I don't want to leave the MOU for a second. So the MOU was passed by council and the funding until December 31st. That was passed May 12th. So I've got all the signatures, but I have to get Amanda, I've got to get your signature.
Yeah.
Now I've been approved by the board. I've got it in my hot little hands. I'm going to drive it down to you so that I can get it to legal so we can advance the funding, because it was signed May 12th by everyone else and we can't release funding until we have all the signatures. So how long will you be at Core 21? It's almost 11 now.
Well, I'm not at Core 21. I'm at my home. So I will be at Core 21, like as per my email, like I'll be at Core 21 as soon as this meeting is over. I'll drive down for you.
Okay, can you just keep me either a text or something? Sorry, I don't want to take up the board.
Of course.
We're under the gun for time here. So if you can just let me know, okay, thanks.
Great.
And I'm actually going to defer marketing to Isaac. He's got 6 minutes before he's got to go, and he's been on the marketing committee longer than I've been here. So.
And in Matt's absence, of course, I'll do my best to provide a really quick update here with the few minutes that I do have left here. So, so bear with me. So since our last meeting in March, actually a lot of things have happened through the marketing committee, and Amanda touched on some of that in her report with respect to economic and beautification, just the update on the Winter Festival of Lights. So I won't get too much into that because we did vote in the March meeting to go ahead with trying to procure some of the lights and decorations and such. But moving from that, some of the updates since March are the fact that, and really it's broken down into a few different categories. So I'll talk a little bit about social media. I'll talk about the summer student who's been, who we secured the grant for. As well as a couple other things. Digital Main Streets, I know one other big initiative, as well as the downtowns of Durham. So quickly on social media, I know there's been lots of campaigns that have been launched since the COVID outbreak. I know that there's been lots of uptick in terms of the engagement on social media. I know Amanda has can probably share some of those numbers, and she touched on some of that already. But there's also been a creation of a BIA downtown blog as well too. So I'm not exactly privy to all the amounts of blog posts that have happened quite yet, but that's been something that's been created just recently. I know that with respect to the summer student who was, we received a grant, I believe it was through, it was funded by Colin Carey's office. Am I correct, Amanda?
Yes, through the federal summer jobs grant.
Exactly. Yeah. So, so Roger started just recently, I believe, right?
Yes, actually, in and around May 15th.
Yeah. So his work is well underway. And with respect to, so another update is on the, so with respect to Taylor, she's been also working away on the communication strategic plan. So that's been underway, and a number of aspects of that are currently underway. She was just hired again also recently, right? That was back in, I believe, also April, right?
Well, we hired her pre-COVID, so the interviews happened end of February, and we had kind of signed on, and she started just as COVID was starting. And we pretty much approved her, well, not approved her, but I ran her resume and everything through the marketing committee.
Very good. So I'm going to, again, just try to fast track some of the additional updates. So she's also been working on the website. That was another big initiative that we've been working on. And so she's, the website was broken down into a number of phases. And she's already completed phase 1 of that, of the website build, and it's gone live. And amazingly, with all the traffic, the website was crashed initially with just some of the uptick and some of the traffic. And she's, I believe, currently working on phase 2 of the website, which will include things like condensing the events into a see and do section. Additional BIA documents are going to be listed on the website. Property and real estate, property and real estate listings. What was that, Amanda? Property and I'm just reading some of Amanda's notes.
Yeah, it's just we're going to have a property and real estate section on, so that our property owners can also benefit from this. So that will be like a one-stop shop for everything downtown. Yeah,
perfect. And there'll also be a volunteer page and submission page as well as a number of other elements. And then in just another minute or so on the Digital Main Street program. So there's been a huge demand, of course, with everything going on with COVID for businesses to want to try to get their either their operations or other aspects of their business online. So there's been a lot of demand. Well, again, Amanda's been lobbying the provincial government to try to both extend and enhance that program through some lobbying through Jennifer French in her office. And then the last thing I'll just quickly touch on is the Downtowns of Durham initiative, which is basically a collaboration between I believe it's 13 distinct BIAs in the Durham region. It's 12 or 13, but effectively to try to help ramp up economic activity as we come out of the pandemic. And I know that that's even broken down into a number of different phases as well too. So phase 1, there's a website that's been created to try to help promote the downtown and downtown economic activity, but there's additional initiatives that are going to follow as a result of that as well. If anyone wants to add to that, Kyle, I'm not sure if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, through the chair, there's a couple of things that are happening, particularly around the digital stuff. So I've got a call this afternoon with BACD, and I believe, Amanda, you've been talking to your other BIAs about some of this other digital sort of stuff. And it has also got an unsolicited proposal from Durham College around doing some of the digital things, also in terms of providing, you know, student support and other support to businesses that need to sort of really migrate their systems more into a digital sort of format. So there's a lot of discussion that is happening right now around that whole area. So Amanda, I want to talk to you kind of that offline, so we're kind of all on the same page. And again, I'm talking to BACD this afternoon. We've already been talking to the region and sort of Durham College. So it's a great idea. I think we just got to make sure all the dots connect and how we move it forward in a most productive manner.
Great. Anything else, Amanda, you want to add?
I mean, there's a considerable effort to really collectively advertise downtowns. We have to recognize that we only have our reach is mighty on our social media platforms, and we have about 6 of them, I believe, on different applications. We only go so far. So partnering with the other BIAs really allows us to reach new audiences, customers who are across the region. And then we also get, as a collective whole, monies through Central Counties, who is putting marketing monies into the downtowns of Durham. So this idea was formed when we met together under the Economic Task Force, and it was an idea of Downtown Whitby and Downtown Oshawa collectively together to start this with them. And then the other BIAs kind of joined on over the last couple of weeks, and it's been an incredible effort, and we're really excited about it. There's multiple phases that will be coming out that I know Isaac is aware of and Matt is aware of as well. So we look forward to bringing them to you in June.
Great, thank you. Events review.
All right.
Andrea.
Yes, okay, so events, we've been placed in quite a conundrum with this COVID situation. We're a bit of a catch-22 with our events right now, wherein we want to proceed with caution on the events that we're having and make sure that they are COVID friendly, and I guess the environments are socially acceptable. However, we also do not want to fall into the trap of really not doing anything at all, because that would be detrimental to our downtown. So Amanda has put together the budget for a few scenarios with the events, and for most of them, they will be canceled. However, we will look at revamping the events altogether. So I mean, the world has certainly experienced a paradigm shift because of COVID, so we'll have to make our events in alignment with this. So we will definitely need to revamp the events that we're offering. With that being said, the only 2 events that I am comfortable promoting at this time would be the drive-in movies during the summer months, because I mean, that is, I think it's safe. And it is also encouraging community to come out and enjoy a movie together in their cars. So that is one event that I would say we can have, which will kind of replace our Summerfest in a way. The other one would be the, I think it's the wine tasting that we have at the gallery, only because that can be managed in the sense of how many people can gain access or entrance at one time for the wine tasting. It's an event that can be controlled. So those are the only 2. The biggest event right now that I am sitting on the fence, and I'm not sure where other board members might be or our committee members, we're yet to have a committee since this COVID event, is the Festival of Lights that's scheduled for, I guess, down in December. I'm on the fence with that for a couple of reasons. One being, it is way too early to determine what needs to be done. I mean, with this COVID situation, things are changing and evolving daily, so we have to play it ear by ear. That's number one. Number two, I'm also very wary of, it's an event that potentially attract a lot of, attract a social gathering, which is contrary to mitigating COVID outbreaks right now. It's not something that we can say control or minimize the amount of feet on the street we're gonna get for that. I mean, before COVID, that would be great, but now with COVID, I'm not sure if we want to attract large crowds for that. What I will put on the table maybe for us to look into is maybe a drive-through of lights, and where there's different art displays of lights where you can, you know, drive through the community and see different lighting arts or something like that. But right now it's just too early to say, to make a decision on that. But I am not really, I would be more leaning on the against that than for that, because it attracts a large crowd. Number two, with that as well, there will also be some extra costs for the lighting, where we have to put up the lights. I believe it was under budgeted for, and it's costing us a bit more to put up those lights. We also need to run electricals to Memorial Park, which will incur more costs to us. So, I mean, that is something that's on the table. We'll have to see if we can get grants or sponsorship or the city to help with that. And right now, everybody is a bit strapped for cash or not looking to, you know, disperse a lot of funds. So we'll need to revisit that maybe monthly or however that is. So the only two events right now really is the drive-in movies and the wine festival at the gallery. With that as well, because events have come to a halt, some of our funds have been reallocated to beautification and streetscapes, into making our downtown still, you know, invitable, vibrant, and friendly. And I believe that is it pretty much for the events. Amanda, am I missing anything? I think I've covered it all.
No, you've covered a huge, significant portion of it. I would say that it's really interesting because our budget, and Andrea and I struggle with this. The events budget looks massive when you look at it, and I say massive because, like, you know, that's a big budget line, but all of these sponsorships in the top of the revenue, the 90,000, comes off of that events line. So it actually diminishes it significantly, to the point where Andrea only has 12% of the budget to implement. I don't like massive amounts of, like, some of these events could have full teams working on them, yet we pull it off every year with our small staff team. I know Ivana was on the phone with Angela the other day, and Angela said that we always have, for Cars on King, for example, we always require over 100 volunteers alone. And that's just community volunteers for that. So you can imagine the effort it takes and the sponsorship and raising that. So when looking at it, Andrea and I were kind of like, well, and myself especially, I wanted to kind of let the board know that when you're looking at the budgeted amount, just remember that $90,000 has to come off of that events line. Also, just to clarify for the Winter Festival of Lights, because she is correct, we also have Bright and Merry in there. So Bright and Merry is the kickoff event that happens every year. And then we also have the Winter Festival of Lights, which is our every single night. It's the light structures and the park is lit up. And so that's a beautification piece. But they are essentially one event. She is correct.
Also just to add on to that, there has been some money that has been spent for events, some big spends for things like the igloos for the Bright and Merry Festival, and some other things that can be used for the events. I'm not too worried about those, only because it's sort of like a deferred ROI. Those are things that we can use in the future for other events, or we can also rent them. So the money has been spent, but it's money well spent. We're not going to get it back, but it's an investment piece that we can always use in the future, and we have if needs be. So that would be the budget line item for events. For the spent portion, if anyone is just wondering what has been these monies spent for events when we haven't been having any events, it would just be for like assets we've acquired to run events.
Great, thank you for that. Any questions from the board? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
No, you can go ahead with the question. I have something else while I have the floor. I'd just like to put on the table for everyone, but
sure,
I'll take questions if anyone has it.
Any questions on the events review? I think Andrea, you and the team and everyone that's been involved has done a fantastic job. It's difficult to pull off when you get to see each other every day. It's even much more difficult when you got to do it remotely by phone calls and try to make try to make decisions on a moving platform. Basically, like you said, it's day by day to figure out when things are going to go ahead or not go ahead, how many people can get together. So I commend you and the team on a difficult job. Well done in terms of staying fluid, adaptive, agile, are words that were used earlier today, and making sure that we're well positioned and ready to go when it makes sense to do so. So thank you very much for that. You wanted to make a point, Andrea?
Well, not really make a point, maybe just some food for thought on the table, or raise something while I have the floor. So it's in regards to the levy, and just a few things. Again, we're going through an economic crisis right now. The government has injected substantial amounts of money into relief for businesses and just the economy as a whole. We have decided to raise the levy prior to this COVID, and yes, I think it's no question that the cap does need to be removed, the levy does need to be raised. However, I think what we need to think about is timing. Is it the right time to do something like this, given the circumstances that has emerged? How can we be more sensitive to our businesses? How can we be more considerate to our community? What can we do as a BIA to help with the economic rebuilding and repair? So for me personally, I'm just putting it out there. I think we definitely need to come back to the table on this whole levy increase to determine a correct course of action, maybe have a SOP, a framework for how we're going to approach this. I'm going back to Cindy's point earlier. She asked Amanda for some transparency into people who've been contacted and things like that. I think we need to gather all those communications, all those feedback, get all the processes put together so we can determine how we're going to implement this, when we're going to implement it, and have a strategic approach to doing it, but also have an economically friendly and socially friendly approach to doing that. With that being said, I was just thinking that, yes, the levy is going to increase, but maybe we can defer the increase of the levy to, say, January 1st, 2021. So it gives businesses a chance to recover themselves somewhat from what has happened. The other side to that is there is a second wave that's going to happen. No one knows when that is. No one knows what that's going to look like. I mean, so these are all factors that we have to consider. So I think that whole levy increase piece needs to be revisited by us to have, it just needs to be revisited. It's going to happen, but we need to revisit how we're going to make it happen and when is the right timing to make it happen.
Thank you for the input there, Andrea. Yeah, I mean, it's not, events make up part of a budget. It's in my mind, it's driven the other way around. What is our plan for the year? And factored into that is what do our members want and what can we afford and what's it look like? Events are a piece of that. And thanks for that update. And then from there to figure out where we sit as a BIA and what to do. And again, that then factors out the financial piece. So thanks. We're almost going to get the financial update in a second, but any other questions on events? So it looks like 2 or 3 are planned for the end of the year, still pending on what our forecast is going to be. And to your point, Andrea, You've talked about the second wave. We talk about the second peak in the first wave. We talk about some events still going ahead in terms of the global side. When you think of reopening, some things are reopening. You talk about the sports franchises are all starting to come back. It looks like they're going ahead. So lots of moving parts for sure. It's imperfect. And that's the thing I've always appreciated around forecasting and planning. You're never going to be 100% right. You're going to be wrong. The question is, how wrong are you going to be? And we really need to figure that out. Lots of information out there for sure. I'm hoping that goes into your events planning and thinking, and I know you guys will come up with the right thing. Any other question on events? Okay. Thank you for that. Finance and audit. There are a couple of pieces in here for you. The first one is the 2019 audit review. There is a draft. So we're in a process. The process is we've completed our section of the audit, and our accountants have sent the materials over to the city's audit process, and we're waiting on feedback from them. We've gone back and forth on a couple of questions and responded. We have yet to finalize that piece coming back. So technically we don't have audited financial statements until the city blesses them. So that's happening as we speak. We're pretty confident and secure that we will pass audit. The questions were not significant in any way, shape, or form. It is part of the city process. So the city's still conducting their audit. Amanda, anything you want to add on the latest questions? I think everything's back at the city right now.
No, everything's at the city. We're just waiting. It was a difficult audit. We used to deal with net budgets, which was not accurate in representation of our organization. And so we had to gross out that budget with Deloitte this year. So there was extra work that had to be done in configuring the first 6 months of the year before my arrival, and then the second half of the year after I arrived.
Okay. The second item is we did not meet. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So just before I do that item, is there going to be a compelling story around sort of what the audit comes out with in terms of we've changed sort of accounting practices or whatever. I just don't want you guys to get hammered for something else that people will just jump on top of just because they want to jump on top of you.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I'm not sure what kind of compelling story we would tell other than the fact that we passed an audit, which is generally accepted accounting principles that auditors look at to make sure that we're compliant with everything. There's good practices in place, and there's good scrutiny over the conduct of the company and how it uses its finance to run its business. So I don't see any issues with any of that. That'll take care of anyone who thinks there's something happening behind the scenes or something not in control. I think,
and that's the issue, right? It's basically, is the audit going to come out and say, okay, you've got a clean audit, so you guys are doing good, because we don't want to put any more fuel on the fire right now around the BIA.
Absolutely, I expect that to come through. It's come through our internal process that way, and the auditors have looked at it. Amanda, you've been closer to the city's feedback. The questions that you've shared with me were not significant from what I'm used to in an industry. In terms of dealing with audits, but Amanda, you can give me a better perspective on the latest round of questions that may have come through.
Yeah, so I've done several audits with other BIAs. I mean, with the exception of trying to create the net, it's really the net versus gross. All of the samples, so obviously they will send us samples, they want receipts, like they go through our books. I mean, they were all very standard questions that I was able to respond within 24 hours. And our accountant was able to respond to, so there was no issues there. It will be a very interesting process, because in previous years, they've taken our budget and they just said basically like we spent within the budget, but then they didn't really showcase in those audits that the true gross figure of what it takes to run the BIA. Whereas this year they're going to, I believe, show our approved budget and then show that gross amount. what is really required. Another interesting piece is that we also have never showed depreciation of assets before. So we do have assets in the sense of banners, lights, and whatnot. So when I came into the BIA, I mentioned this to Ivano, and he enacted basically that we do need to think about doing that. So that's going to be showcased on the audit, and it's going to be a difference from previous years. So it's exactly what Ivano talked about, standard accounting principles. I mean, I've asked them several times in the last 3 weeks. I know Ivano was CC'd on those emails. Did they need anything further? Did they have any concerns? Did they have any questions? They have expressed thus far that they have nothing further, and they haven't given me any reason to think that there will be an issue.
Any other questions on the 2019 financials and the audit? Okay, with that, I'll move into March and April statement. We did not have meetings in March and April, so you have two sets of unaudited statements there. Without going line by line on them, basically we're about a quarter of the, or 30% of the year through in covering those statements. Nothing extraordinary. Anything that's beyond 30% spend is an annualization issue. Things like the insurance, we paid the insurance bill, so it's paid in whatever month it shows up. It's 100% of the budget. We don't expect to pay in installments, so essentially that shows up as a higher percentage. There's a few other things in there like training, education, and travel. Obviously, in terms of running around the city and doing a bunch of things. Before COVID, we had a bunch of expenses. Since COVID, everyone's doing things remotely. There might be some fees on support elements there. They're a little bit higher than the run rate that we're at. When you look at legal expenses, that was all related to one particular activity when we were doing some trademarking. So we were on a faster spend because of the legal needs to register and put the trademarks in place. And obviously things like in promotion, like banners, we spent money to acquire things, and so you're seeing those spends as lumpy spend. So we would have set up a budget. It's definitely under the year's budget, but it shows up in a particular month. Other than that, everything else is rolling through as reported by committees. We're working the plan. Whatever Andrea mentioned, whatever we purchased in some of for the events, to dovetail to Amanda's comment about the balance sheet issue. If we bought a product, it shows up as equipment purchased, and it shows up on the balance sheet. I think that's a smart move rather than renting facilities every year. If we're going to run events and we think they're signature events that are going to be repeated year after year, it makes better sense to invest to procure. It just so happens we got a COVID year this year where we may not run that event, but we certainly have assets now or items that we could reuse year after year if we're going to continue those events. So some of the spend in the event side that Andrea described are for purchases rather than rentals. There are also some examples where we might have had to put deposits down to hold something. I think Amanda had mentioned to me that deposits are either refundable in the current year or they can be pivoted over to the future year's use. So I want to give people the impression that where we can refund those deposits, we will, and where we're using them as placeholders in next year's event, we will do either one of those things. So that's where you see some of the shifting of the numbers, but I'm not concerned at any of these numbers that are in front of us today. That explains some of the things that are running a little bit faster than others on the line by line item. I'm happy to.
We didn't have a beautification update from that. It was under economic development. I just wanted to make sure that that update happened.
Sure. Let me take questions on the finance piece, and then we'll come back to beautification. Is that okay with you, Amanda?
Absolutely. Beautification will have some updates probably on like those budget lines if anybody has questions on them. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Fair enough. Any questions on the March and April statements?
I don't have a question on the statements. I just wanted to find out what our plan is. So are we going to go with regards to the levy? Are we going to go back to the table and discuss that, given the new information or the situation that we have right now? Or are we discussing that today, or are we discussing that at a different time? What's our plan on that?
I'd like to do it today. It's the after beautification update. It'll be the in-camera session where we look at the scenarios. So essentially we're at mid-year. It's a good time to step back. All the discussions taking place of where we're at, how much we've spent, feedback from the members, what we see the future, what other BIAs are doing, what the rest of the world is doing as well. I think we're now at that stage to basically do the go forward discussion, and the next piece is the in-camera piece with the 4 scenarios that we're looking at in terms of figuring out what our next plan is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no worries. Any other questions on finance? The March, April statements? No. Okay, do we want to pivot back to beautification? Back to, who's got beautification? Sorry, Amanda?
No, it's Jeanette.
Oh, Jeanette, sorry, Jeanette, go ahead.
That's me. So just a quick touch up on beautification. I think we have a lot of plans today. I mean, this year we've budgeted this, but it turns out that we did not budget enough. That's why we're taking off from events budget. And thank you, Andrea, for giving us some money. But let's see. Let me just. So right now for the beautifications, our banners are up, and I was told that they should be good for 2 seasons. We are still expecting revenue from our banner partners. We have half of the amount that we were supposed to get, but not all of them yet. We did purchase some shipping containers. That's where we're going to store all our equipment and all the items that we've purchased that we will get to be reusing for events and for beautification. Right now, we're not paying any rent to park that shipping container, but we would have to look into moving that shipping. I think right now it's in OPUC, but we will have to move that sometime in the future. So we'll have to look into budget, adding that onto the budget as well. The wreaths, we'll be moving that to the shipping container. Core 21 wants those removed from the building already. We've also had our Christmas lights for the Winter Light Festival that's already in the works. We've already started the move to purchase them. We're already talking to our suppliers for that. And we have replaced the broken lights from the street poles. We're looking into selling them, possibly to get more funds. And the ones that are reusable, we're looking to sell them to smaller towns if that's possible. We're looking into that possibility. But yeah, we still haven't met. Right now we don't have any committee members, so and also because of the situation, we haven't really met for the beautification committee, so we haven't really made any decisions except for the winter festival of lights that we're planning. I think that's this year, that's where we are most focused on, because it's sort of like a kickoff, and hopefully by then the situation, the COVID-19 situation, would have mellowed down and people are more willing to go out, and that will I think that will really work into inviting people back to downtown and increasing our foot traffic there. But yep, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Jeanette. Any questions for Jeanette on beautification? In selling those parts that you're selling, I guess you said the street light components that you're selling, I applaud the effort in terms of better managing our assets and resources. I'm assuming, Amanda, you talked to the accountant on making sure those items are fully depreciated, so it's basically a gain on disposal for us?
Correct, yes.
Excellent. Maybe Michael, in terms of governance, I mean, when we dispose or sell of assets, do we have any controls around that we have to be mindful of?
I'm not aware of any policies that we have in place surrounding that right now. It's something I can look into.
Okay, great. So it gives the executive
I
directors.
think it's a common practice for other organizations as well, other BIAs. They do that as well for items that they no longer use, or if they have upgraded, they do that. But yeah, it would be good to have something in our bylaw to maybe allow us for that, just to make sure that we're covered.
I'll leave that to Michael to look at that. Right now, nothing restricts us, so I think that you can go ahead as planned, but we'll come back through that.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I believe there's actually requirements on the local board stuff that in terms of that assets and property and all that stuff, there are some requirements there. So let's just table that and we'll have a look at it.
Great. Okay, thank you. Maybe Michael, if you follow up with Kyle in terms of what's required there. You're saying, Kyle, under the city's bylaws, there's some components that might restrict that?
It's more than the city's bylaws. I think this is coming under sort of that whole local boards thing.
Okay.
There are certain pieces that need to be put in place in terms of assets and all of that sort of stuff. And they're all technicalities, but and we'll get there. And I don't think there's any issues there, quite frankly. It's one of those little detail things we need to deal with.
Perfect. Makes sense. Great. Seeing there are no other questions, we need a motion to accept all the committee reports. So can I get a motion that the Board of Management approve all committee reports as presented?
Yep.
Thanks, Glenn. Seconder?
Yep.
Thanks, Michael. Glenn, assuming you moved it, you're good?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Michael, since you seconded, you're good?
Yes.
Isaac?
I missed some of the discussion. I'm going to abstain my vote.
Okay. Jeanette?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
I'm a yes, so I think we're good. We're sitting here at 11:30. We're at the in-camera session. Before we go in camera, does everyone want to take a 2-minute bio break again?
Mr. Chair,
I will have to leave at a hard deadline of 12.
Okay.
Return.
So
Maybe we should just push through and then call it a wrap.
I'm here with my water, so I'm good to push through. I think we should just push through and just, go through it.
Okay.
Sorry, I want to be clear that you're going into camera, and Michael will read these to talk about the scenarios because they have direct implications to staff and labor.
Okay.
So Michael will have to be very clear about that.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yes?
I question the need to go into in-camera. And it's really related to and I understand kind of the perspective that's coming out in terms of, salaries and or staffing and all of that, but that could probably be rolled up into kind of just like one item. I would just caution you guys about going to in camera when you don't need to particularly go into camera. So that's my advice to you.
I would agree. I would just not talk about the lines highlighted in black, which contain staff salaries on the scenarios.
I think, Mr. Chair, if I could just chime in also, yeah, you have to be very, very careful. You're very limited under the Municipal Act on what you can do in camera. And so this is not an in-camera session. Everything affects staffing, so it's not under the Act.
We do have another reason, though, to go in camera today that is not related to the budget, just as an FYI, too, for everyone.
So separate them.
Agreed.
Yeah, I believe that the levy discussion should be had not in camera.
I agree.
Anything obviously discussing staff remuneration directly will have to be withheld. We can't disclose numbers on that. But as a whole, or as a larger piece, certainly the levy discussion overview should be had not in camera.
Okay. So as long as we keep to the advice, I'm hearing, I haven't heard from Peter or Isaac in a second, but the advice is not to go in camera, but to not disclose line items that are sensitive around staffing and salaries. So as long as we keep to that, I think we're in good shape. Peter, Isaac, any issues from you?
No, I would agree to that in principle.
Yeah, it's good for me. I know that there's one item that we need to be in camera for. So if we need to do that today, let's get it over with quickly. But otherwise, I agree.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go ahead. We'll continue on. I need a 1 minute break. Glenn, I can hand it off to you if you want to keep going on any other items, but I really do need a 1 minute break.
Go take your break.
Okay, thanks.
Would you like to enter into camera, Glenn, so that I can speak about that one piece that is
Yes.
not levy related? And then Angela and I will stop recording. You'll need a motion from Michael.
Okay.
Motion. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So it'd be. Sorry.
Well, we need a motion to go in camera. Is that what you're doing, Michael?
That's what I'm doing. So motion pursuant to subparagraph 239(2)(b of the Municipal Act. This meeting be closed to the public in order to discuss item 12B of the amended agenda, which involves my apologies. The section of the Municipal Act is subparagraph 239(2)(I), that this meeting be closed in order to consider an update from the Executive Director, which is related to commercial relations supplied in confidence to the board. The information has been supplied in confidence to the board, and if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to interfere significantly or prejudice the contractual negotiations of the board.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
I'll second it. Peter.
Okay. Okay, and so Peter, you're a yes?
Yes.
I myself am a yes. Andrea?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Isaac?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Okay, moved. Okay, so
we're out of camera.
Perfect. And if you do need to go back into camera, you do need to make another motion if you would like to talk about staff or anything for the levy. Michael, I believe, has that wording if necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now, what's in front of us now is the go forward perspective. It's a good time. All good companies usually do a mid-year sort of analysis anyways, in terms of looking forward and deciding, if there's any adjustments that have to be made in terms of the plan. Our strategy is clear. Our strategy's been our strategy from day one. Certainly it's a good time to look because we've all felt the impact of COVID. So here we are, a couple of months into COVID. A lot of what we're going to decide and discuss about how things move forward sort of are an adjunct to the events and beautification and all the committee work that's been out there, all the good work that's gone on. We've heard some snippets about the look ahead, and now it's time to match the budget and the plan accordingly and how we fund those things. So Amanda, how did you want to tackle it? You want me to just open up with the document that people have in front of them, which I can describe?
I would describe it because that document has information on
fair enough
staff. So I would definitely describe that document and then go
open it up. Yeah, and then open up for I think it's more questions. So just to describe the document in front of you, you guys all have it. There's the original approved budget that we had for 2020, which is the first column. There's the year-to-date spend, which now incorporates an up-to-date May spend, which is I think May 19th is what we've used. So you saw earlier our March and April financial statements, and now what you're seeing is a bit of an adjustment to include a year-to-date spend to May 19th, which has not changed appreciably. Amanda, I would take it from the 19th to today.
No, there's probably minor things, but nothing of significance.
So a good headshot of where we're at in terms of money and finances, and then start the particular versions of what we're looking at going forward. The next column is an adapted column. So it basically reflects the fact that revenue expected from sponsorships and programs and any particular grants and other revenues are likely not to materialize if A, the event's not going ahead, and or B, the appetite for money to sponsor things just doesn't seem to be there. Although there are some successes we talked about earlier with some grants for the ramps and some of those other things that are good to have. The next 4 columns deal with 4 scenarios after that. So that adapted column is a good one to know about because it's basically saying we're relying predominantly on the levy that was approved to basically fund whatever we're doing going forward. So it gives you an idea of what kind of limits the budget's already under with the revenue piece already shrunk. And then the 4 scenarios after that. Scenario 1 is a stay the course approach. So what's been described as what's possible, given our understanding of going ahead, is scenario 1, and that leads to a bottom line. Scenario 2 is a version that basically eliminates events and programs that are left for the remainder of the year. Scenario 3 is a pretty much scale back right down to a bare bones minimum of the BIA, which is essentially I call it a phones and website perspective in responding to people who have questions of or support comments of or needs of the BIA. And then scenario 4, which is basically shut the BIA down, essentially. None of these scenarios really represent a predominant view one way or the other. I mean, I don't think that we have a fiduciary responsibility to keep the company alive going forward. So I really don't think scenario 4 is a viable, real option, although it's an option that's presented to us anyways for consideration. That to close it down requires some shutdown costs as well. So those are the 4 scenarios with the other 3 columns, which are basically approved budget, year-to-date expenses, and adapted for revenue shortfalls in terms of grants and sponsorship reductions. So that's kind of it in front of you. When you get right down to the very bottom end, we look at what's available. So each one of those presents a different expense line relative to a revenue line, and what's left is a surplus. My approach on this one, I'd like to hear from the board members, and I'll open it up in a second to questions, is to figure out which scenario we're landing on. That'll determine what's left. And then from what's left, I think the secondary question is, what do we do with whatever's left in terms of, I'll call it a surplus, but it's essentially, if we don't need the money, what do we do with it, with whatever's left? So if everyone's good with that approach, I'm happy to open it up for discussions in terms of questions about any of the scenarios.
I'll start.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Well, it's not. First, so I'd like to make 2 or 3 points. Number 1, I think it's important that we make a decision here and now today in the next few minutes. Otherwise, this discussion is going to continue on forever. And no matter what we do, some are going to be happy, some are not going to be. One of the things that Daryl Sherman talked about is the caps. I am 100% absolutely opposed to a cap. One of Daryl's his arguments, Daryl and I have known each other for 20 years. I have a lot of respect for him. And so we've had some discussions over email and in person. One of his arguments is, so what does the BIA do for the clinic? So the BIA rates are not based on what how each property benefits. It's based on your tax rate and your assessment. So to me, that argument makes no sense. Caps, all they do is let bigger players pay less rates than the smaller players, and I think that is totally unfair taxation. So what I would like to see is a scenario 2, I guess. That's the one with a slight reduction, which compensates that we're not going to be holding some events, and we continue on with all of the other programs and things that are budgeted in there.
Thanks, Glenn. Any other comments, discussions, questions?
I'd echo my
So,
support
Mr.
for
Chair,
that.
it's Kyle here.
Sorry, Michael, sorry, Michael first, then Kyle.
I defer to Kyle. I'd like to hear what he has to say.
Sure.
Okay, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a couple of comments or a couple of thoughts. There was kind of a near-death experience that happened at council on Monday, and in many ways, the BIA was successful because of just technicalities as much as anything else in terms of reopening sort of pieces. But there are really kind of two kind of motions that were put forward that seemed to almost have the votes. And Rick, you weren't at council on Monday, but I'd like to hear your opinion at some point. There was probably a pretty good group that said, okay, we're going to take you back to the 2019 level in terms of, $250,000 or whatever it was, which by my reading of your financial expenditures, you've already done that for this year anyway. So you're kind of scuppered one way or the other. And then the other piece was even more disturbing was, okay, let's just disband the bloody BIA. And I'm thinking that's the last place we want to go. So, I fully appreciate the sort of the need and, quite frankly, I'm very supportive of the whole sort of need to position yourself for recovery and move all of that. But the reality is that out there that, you guys don't have a really strong support at City Council right now. And there's going to be an expectation that there's going to be some sort of scale back in some form or level. And I don't think, quite frankly, if you don't do it, there's going to be an issue. And then if you do it, then there'll be complaints about kind of wasn't enough, or it was too much, that sort of thing. So it's a no-win situation, but I think you really need to sort of deal with this now and then let us know so that we can report back to Development Services Committee on June 8th. And that's my comments.
Michael?
And thanks for that, Kyle. And I echo, and it's been reflected a couple of times in this meeting, we're in a no-win situation as far as making everyone happy goes. But I think going back to Ivano, your piece on, we have to understand what is our mission here. What's the Oshawa BIA doing? What are our goals, and how can we achieve that? And I would echo with Glenn that I don't think taking a step back makes sense in this scenario. We need to certainly scale back and plan for the reality of the situation, which is we're not going to be able to have all our events, and we need to find ways where we can save money and tighten up. But I think that makes sense with scenario 2 as well. So I would also echo my support on that and Glenn's comments.
Anybody? Andrea?
It's me, Jeanette.
Oh, Jeanette, sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. I just wanted to say that I was listening to Kay Matthews' presentation earlier, and she's made really good points. She said that BIA answers the council, and the BIA's primary function is to make the downtown conducive to a healthy business. But I also just wanted to point out that although the BIA answers the council will answer to the public. And it is very important that we take into consideration, especially the situation that we are right now. My position in the matter, I think that I am with Andrea. I'm not opposed to the levy increase, but I don't think it is. I think it has to be deferred. We have to tighten up our belts right now. It's unfortunate because we actually have a lot of plans. Our plans for the 2020-2021 is really aggressive. It was a great plan, but I think given the circumstances, this is something that none of us foresaw. So we have to adjust to it, and I think we should at least tighten our belts or defer the levy increase to maybe 2021. It also is it's a good it's good to right now the government is giving away, and if we increase our levy right now, it's going to look like all other branches of the government are giving away to people and we're taking. So I think we should kind of revisit that.
Do you have a preference at this stage, Jeanette? Thanks for that input.
I don't think she heard you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeanette. Thanks for the input, Jeanette. I appreciate it. Did you have a scenario preference at this stage, given that some of that feedback?
Scenario, I think scenario number 2 would be the best scenario right now. But yeah, I think if we could have the levy deferred, we should look into that also.
Yeah, a good point. I mean, at this stage, we're trying to look at what does life look like going forward, and then from there, it's going to spin out under the scenario a certain expense line and how we could make that work. You know, obviously, when you look at the bottom, there's surplus and there's some risks attached to each one of these decisions. And then once you net that out, there, you know, then the question is, what do you do with the surplus? At this stage, the levy is approved, and so it's shown as something that is our revenue line. And don't forget, you know, we are not going to get the sponsorship grants and funds we expected as part of the original plan. So there's that component that's shrinking as well. So you know, to factor that all in, I don't know that we can roll it back to Michael's point, like rolling it back to time, going backwards. So this, you know, that definitely has to factor into some of your thinking or your points that were made.
Okay. Well, in terms of the scenarios, I am leaning towards scenario number 2, but yeah.
Okay, great. Andrea, Peter.
Sorry, Amanda?
Yes, go ahead.
Amanda?
Yep.
I'm just trying to gain access by another computer so I can leave the meeting on this computer and pick up on the next computer.
Oh, perfect. Just
but the host is rejecting me, so it's me.
Oh, you haven't popped up. Here, try it again, and I'll let you in.
Alrighty. Yeah. So I am also leaning to scenario 2 on that, but I think the wording just needs to be slightly changed to, instead of eliminating, maybe scaling back and reviewing.
Okay, Amanda, you're closer to how the numbers sort of fared out. Is it better to say that? I noticed physical improvements are going ahead, promotions going ahead, and then there's scale back on administration. And I would say events are pretty much scaled back, unless there are any. Is there anything going ahead from your end, Amanda, that's going ahead with events?
I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. I want to make sure Andrea gets in here, because I won't be able to do both once I start speaking.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to, maybe I can go to 12:05, but I've got somebody waiting for me now.
Same with me.
Okay, so
I'm going to go quick then.
It just said you're unable to rejoin this meeting because you were previously removed by the host. So I'm not sure.
It's still, you're not popping up, Andrea. Sorry.
Okay. All right. No problem.
Okay. Sorry. I want to be very clear with option number 2 so that there's no over promises and under delivers situations happening here. That scenario 2, with that comes the cutting of the staff team, which is understandable. But I really want to place an emphasis with every committee will have to scale back, even though there's dollars for marketing. There is not enough hours in the day to be able to implement. We will have to scale back at least 50% of our programs.
Okay, thank you for that input. I want to get everybody else's points before everybody disappears, because otherwise we're not making a decision. Peter?
Yeah, sorry, very quickly. And I did see that you wanted a secondary update, so later, which we won't have time for, but I will say this. I mean, I tend to agree with the scenario 2 idea, but I wouldn't put the deferral off the table. Things are rough, I know that, and it's going to be even rougher because in the fall, we are going online, and we will have some labs open and some research centers open, but the usual influx of students that you're used to getting just are not going to be downtown, and it's going to really hit the smaller places hard. And I agreed to eliminate the cap. I'm surprised you have a cap. I don't. That sounds medieval to me. So I'm all in favor. I totally agree with Glenn there, but I'm not so sure about how much you can get away with. To go back to Kyle's statement, the sentiment in City Hall seems fairly. I should say, sorry, City Council seems fairly clear.
Okay, so you're thanks for that update, Rick. Very quickly.
I'm going to defer to my other board colleagues first. Maybe people didn't catch the announcement, but I had major surgery on Monday and missed the whole council meeting and all that discussion. So I have some ideas, but I would like to hear what the rest of the board members say first before I state mine. Thank you.
Okay, Isaac, you're it's you, then me, and then back to everyone else to close us out.
Yeah, so I'm hearing loud and clear the climate at City Council. So I tend to believe that in order for the downtown businesses to get out of this situation, there's going to need to be some level of spend there. But it sounds like absolutely that some concessions need to be made there. So to keep it short, I would say that scenario 2 likely looks like what makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, I think my view going forward, you've seen in some of the emails and some of the data that's coming in, it's pushing towards second wave, likely a protracted startup for phase 1. So we are scaled back for sure. So scenario 2 for me to keep it short. So everyone's been around the table. I've heard that. Before we do a motion to accept scenario 2, does anyone want to adjust what they've said so far?
Maybe
I'm still.
Go ahead, Michael.
Go ahead.
Or Jeanette, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to ask Ivano for the benefit of everyone who doesn't have the sheet in front of you, as best as you can, if you can just summarize before any sort of action has taken place what scenario 2 is and means. And we've kind of touched on it in little pieces here, but if you could do a brief scenario overview of that.
Sure. Very quickly, it keeps the levy as is in terms of collecting the money. Again, that's approved. The assumption is we're going to collect that. Then you go to it scales back using the adaptive concept that basically the levy is the predominant amount of money that we are collecting. There's a couple of grants we have approved, but pretty much our revenue line is pretty much the levy, 100% levy or 95% levy. Under administration, we have scaled that back somewhat. So there are some costs associated with that scale back, which are reflected in the risk, but essentially we've cut back costs on administration. But the biggest cutback would be on promotion is about 30% reduced. Events are the biggest cutback, which are pretty much scaled back to about 15%, which is basically the funds we've used to purchase things. And then physical improvements stay almost the course. So it's basically doing some of the beautification, physical improvements, some of the administration, which I believe we're going to need to support people during the COVID component and to keep the BIA concept and services as a whole. So I think most of the savings, it results in a savings, significant savings of about 25%. And I like that. 25% makes sense to me because if the region kicks in at 25%, we're right back to scaling this thing back and passing that back to our component. So with those two pieces, we could be back to our 2019 levels around the levy, but there's no guarantees around that. So essentially, we've scaled back events and some promotions and some administration, and pretty much went ahead with physical improvements. Does that help you out?
So I'd like to propose a motion that we adopt scenario 2. I don't know how you want to.
Sure, that's fair enough. That's good. Do we want to have a seconder on that?
I would second that. Before we go to vote, I don't know if Jeanette still had a comment to make.
Jeanette?
Yeah, I was just going to say earlier when somebody wanted to make sure that everybody's cleared on their position. I just wanted to clarify that I am for scenario 2, but I'm also for deferring.
Okay, but right now the scenario 2 is on the table for a vote. Thanks for that, Jeanette. Motion by Glenn, seconded by Michael. Are we good with that, Michael? Okay, going around the table. Andrea?
Wait a second now.
I'm sorry? Sorry, Rick?
Yeah. So we can speak to the motion now then?
Yes.
Yeah, so I still have a question based on what I've heard from people, and I respect my board colleagues' input on this. If you get down to the bottom of the column under scenario 2, it talks about a surplus, or projects a surplus of $139,271.11. Very specific. My question would be, what's the go forward plan with that surplus?
I think I'd like to get, because people are going to leave, Rick, and we're going to lose quorum. So I think we have to deal with that as a separate issue. So with that surplus, the way it stands as of today, the levy's approved. It's the scenario we pick, if we pick 2, is going to create a surplus. I think we got to come back to that. We're going to lose quorum if we don't even take this vote. So I think once we do that, we can deal with that issue if you're okay with that, Rick.
So my quick input would be simply this. Obviously, there are COVID changes and economic changes that everybody's going through, and obviously we need to make adjustments. So if the adjustments can be accommodated by scenario 2, then that's, I guess, where our best course of action would be.
Great, thank you. So Glenn motion, Michael seconded. Andrea?
Sorry. So again, I am for scenario 2. However, I would like the wording to be scaled back, not eliminated. And I'm for scenario 2 with the idea of having the levy deferred.
Okay, again, on the levy piece, right now, we're just picking the scenario. We're going to have to come back to what we do with that surplus in terms of any other actions with respect to the levy. So,
okay, so I'm for 2. I'm for scenario 2.
Great. Isaac?
Yes.
Jeanette?
Sorry, I thought I already said my position.
Yep, no, I just need a yes or no for.
Oh, yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Rick?
Yeah.
It's a yes for me, and I'm assuming, Glenn, since you moved it, you're a yes, and Michael,
Yes.
since you seconded it, you're a yes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going with scenario 2, which is now going to create a surplus. Now, I don't know if we want to deal with it here because I think, Michael, you have to jump off, and Glenn, you have to jump off as well. So.
Yes.
Yes, and I have to go too soon.
Okay, so we need to deal with these next pieces. Is it wise to look for another date on calendar in the next little while to create another meeting? If I can ask Amanda to do that, we can at least
do that. Yes.
At least we can adjourn on this one.
It should, oh, sorry.
I need a motion to adjourn so everyone can leave.
Through you, Mr. Chair, could I just make a comment before you adjourn? Just on this scenario 2, that what will need to happen, the next step is this has to be sent back to council. Could I either through, Michael's already jumped off the line, but we could talk about it. I just need to know a concise of what that will be, on what the numbers, the surplus, just a condensed version of what that means, so then council will understand what the BIA has chosen. Is that clear?
Well, I think it's clear what you said. I think we had to come back and talk about that, but I want to respect people who have to jump off before we lose everything. So the direction is Amanda's going to look for another date in calendar over the next little while, because I don't think we can let this wait till our June meeting. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Glenn, a seconder?
Yes.
I'll second it. Everyone's good?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much for indulging the extra time. Thank you. We're almost home, so we're almost there.
Good productive meeting. Appreciate it.
Good day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, guys. It's great to see you all. Keep safe.